Okay, Ms. Kaufman, it's all yours.
Thank you. All right, welcome to the December 17th meeting of the Maplewood Richmond Heights Board of Education. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I know we have several submissions for public forum this evening. As always, we appreciate the input from the public, but don't anticipate being able to respond to specific questions or concerns raised this evening. But again, appreciate that. Kat Norton is going to read those submissions into the meeting minutes this evening. And well, I think that we probably won't exceed our 15-minute time period for public comment. We will keep time. Go ahead, Kat.
Thank you, President Kaufman. The first comment this evening comes from Amber Withicombe. The comment reads, I ask the board to urgently address circumstances for students who will not be able to return to in-person learning until a vaccine is widely available. Schools are not safe for those who are subject to the most devastating effects of the virus. The district must improve virtual academy curricula and expand cohort learning opportunities for these students. I also urge staff to disclose aggregated demographic data for families that enroll in the virtual academy. As the New York Times reported on December 8th, many non-white families are not ready to send their children back to classrooms despite their struggles with remote learning, in part because of the disproportionately harsh impact the virus has had on their communities. Existing disparities will widen if we do not make the district's remote learning option more equitable. The second comment this evening comes from Ron and Caroline Strong. The comment reads, guidance released on December 4th from the CDC stated, schools provide numerous benefits beyond education, including meals, social, physical, and behavioral and mental health services. And because of their critical role to children and the disproportionate impact that school closure can have on these with the least economic means, K-12 schools should be the latest setting to close after all other mitigation measures have been employed and the first to open when they can do so safely. I will just say we completely agree with this guidance. Dr. Garza said in conclusion, as he read that update, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Garza, Children's Hospital, infectious diseases doctors, and Spring Schmidt have all said schools are safe, with studies showing a 50% lower risk of getting COVID if a child is in school. All of us have a choice. Choose all virtual if you disagree with the experts. The next comment this evening is from Brooke Rintoul. The comment reads, I've advocated for public schools for a long time. It is the right of every child to have a free and quality education. Schools are an integral part of a community. They provide so much more than the 3 R's. For some kiddos, school is the safest and happiest part of their day. 9 months must feel like an eternity to a child who misses their friends, teachers, their favorite custodian, 2 hot meals, new crayons, so many books. The facts are clear. Children need to be in school. The effects of not are long-lasting and should be avoided, especially when the experts are telling us that schools are safe and need to be open? What gives us the right as adults to ignore the facts regarding COVID? We've seen the negative impacts of ignoring the medical experts. We can do this. We must. Our children have paid such a high price for this pandemic. The next comment comes from Donald Miller. The comment reads, my understanding is that medical experts such as Dr. Fauci and our local MD, Dr. Garza, agree that it is safer for most children to return to schools who have strict safety protocols in place than for them not to do so. I also understand that MRH specifically has very low transmission rates as opposed to the country and especially rural areas. And if other parents disagree, then they can and should be able to keep their kids home. However, we have choices, or at least we were told we did last summer, as long as the choices are supported by sound health policy. So many of our kids are suffering academically, socially, and emotionally right now. We need to do whatever we can within reason to get them back to a semi-normal education routine and schedule. Thank you for listening. The next comment comes from Jacqueline Fiber. The comment reads, kids are back in school and safe all over this country and beyond. There's good evidence in schools operating with PPE and under capacity that attendance is safe for kids and adults. We need the district to reopen in January for the full day, including the before and after care that is essential for working parents. Many have left MRH schools and will continue to leave if there is no clear plan for fully reopening the schools soon. We continue to lose diversity, excellence, and great minds and souls on a daily basis while the board remains undecided on a full reopening date. I do not want the negative media coverage and lawsuits that other school districts are experiencing. Our reputation for excellence will be further tarnished and house values will plummet. Please stand up for the working families and single parents in your community. The next comment comes from Chris Starkey. The comment reads, I'm not writing to tell you about how our children and families are suffering with Tier 1. I am here to say families are trying to figure out ways to get out. Moving or private school, attendance will drop. Families stuck here for personal or financial reasons will not forget as we go to the polls and vote no on your bonds. Families will not recommend MRH to their friends. Property values will drop and you will receive less tax revenue. And the downward spiral continues. MRH will rise to the top of the worst schools again because GPAs, standardized testing, and ACT scores will fall. Dropout rates will rise. Let the PR nightmare begin. It will take years to recover, just like last time. Teachers will leave because they can't teach. But you have the power to end this now. Get our children back in school, save this community. The next comment comes from Scott and Abatha Boyle. The comment reads, we are appreciative of the recent detailed communication that has been distributed by the district and school administrators, including the expectation that for those that choose the tiered option, in-person learning will resume in second semester, and that this decision will be based on expert recommendations. Currently, those recommendations at all levels are that schools are the safest place for our kids. We are concerned that if the board does not prioritize returning students to campus now, that it will have long-term damaging effects on our community, a community built around this district. We implore the board to follow through on its commitment, listen to experts, trust the administration, and respect the voice of parents who choose the tiered option with full understanding that students will return to in-person learning this semester. The next comment comes from Gina LaRose. The comment reads, We value MRH schools, teachers, and staff. Because of this, we support them in delaying opening buildings to daily in-person gatherings for as long as, number one, CDC indicators for school reopening remain in the orange or red zones, or number two, local hospital capacity remains at a crisis level. We see that a hybrid model for daily gathering actually results in less instruction time for students and could likely cause COVID exposure to MRH student and staff. This would also divert even more district resources to managing the inevitable disruptions that would follow due to exposures, quarantine, and illness. It is advisable to continue instruction and intervention remotely and in small, targeted ways until pandemic indicators fall, then remain in more favorable ranges. A concerned group of MRH families is submitting a more detailed jointly signed letter today. The next comment comes from Jessica Hersey. The comment reads, I really don't see how working parents can make this half-day thing work. I am a single parent who works full-time with grandparents that help but live out of the district with no transportation. This is an inconvenience. I was able to make the 2 full days work. This is so scary for so many working families. The next comment comes from Kimberly Peralta. The comment reads, is there going to be another vote, or do kids actually get to go back in January? Can we have the stats on how many students have left the district this year? The next comment comes from Catherine Hayes. The comment reads, hi, I wanted to send a note expressing my desire as a parent to continue with virtual learning for the tiered plan high school students at this time. COVID cases are way up at this time, and there is no data to support it being safer to begin in-person classes than it was to start at the start of the year. Additionally, the half-day, 4-day-a-week school is not workable for many working parents, especially single parents like me. More so, if my child were to have the afternoon shift each day. Not only is this bad for my schedule, my son is autistic and is a morning person and is very upset at the notion of the afternoon half days. It would be both of our preferences to continue with distance learning at this point, rather than try to force this system into place now when COVID cases are through the roof and the holidays will likely make it worse. Thanks. And the final comment is a second comment submitted by Jacqueline Fiber. The comment reads, please welcome our students back to full-time in-person school with before and after care available ASAP. The half measure proposed of a hybrid model is unacceptable. Most schools remain in hybrid mode for 2 weeks before returning to full-time in-person instruction around the country. MRH kids and families are suffering. We are receiving a massive disadvantage compared to other school districts around the country. Kids with disabilities and young kids especially are suffering. This is in violation of many students' access to a free and appropriate education and placing many obstacles to accessing services and instructional supports. Our education is not equitable. It is elitist and classist and not accessible to many families in this community. Please end this now. Save our community from our spiraling economic and educational status. That concludes the public forum submissions.
Thank you, Kat. Appreciate that. Obviously, a lot of comments about impending decisions. We will be hearing more about plans and the future here related to COVID later in the agenda. So hopefully those folks are listening and we'll get some questions answered. Let's move to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion?
Move to approve. Go ahead.
You got it, Francis.
No, take it.
All right. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Nikki.
Second.
Thank you, Brandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Our first study item this evening is a construction update from Itner. Roxana or Mike, I'm not sure if you want to make any introductory comments here.
Well, things are progressing nicely. And so I think Todd is here prepared to talk with you about where we are in that process. We've been continuing our weekly meetings with the Itner team, and I see really good progress. So Todd, if you're ready, we'll let you join us.
Great, thank you. Do I need to share my screen or does it run on your end?
If you could, I'd appreciate it.
I will do so. Okay. We'll make sure everybody's seeing, should be the slide presentation cover.
Yes.
Photo of the high school campus. Everybody
Yep.
sees that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, thank you again for having us this evening. Julie apologizes for not being able to join. She is a little under the weather, so I am covering for her this evening. Happy to do it. Glad to be talking with you here before the holiday break. Feels like maybe this year more than any, it's obviously much needed, but I know you have, by the listening in on your public forum, you have a lot to consider tonight. So I'll be brief and kind of get you through it. We are making good progress. So we are further along in the design development of all the projects. In fact, at the elementary schools, we are largely wrapped up. We're wrapping up just a handful of, so the documents themselves are largely done. The one component which we've been working on still with the staff, and in fact, just had a meeting this week, is just focused on the playground there. So we had a meeting with the staff, with a playground supplier, and we're working through our options on that with the budget that we have available. So that's really the finishing touch for the project there at the elementary school. We have some ongoing coordination. We are looking at camera and intercom coordination and some things like that. But pretty much right now, those documents are largely complete. Our estimating is done and we're on track. And we are going to basically get prepared to bid those this coming winter so that we can get work started at the end of the spring semester. And that goes for both, or that goes for all the projects, but the elementary and ECC are both essentially in the same position. Middle school, high school. The last time we talked, when you talked with Julie, we were wrapping up our design development documents to start our estimating. And we have done that. And in fact, this week we have received an independent estimate. Actually, it's our second independent estimate. Our first one was performed by Itner's in-house construction personnel. And not only did they do an estimate, but they also did a detailed walkthrough. We call it a constructability review. And these folks have no familiarity with your project really at all. So when they come in, they're coming at it cold. And we get a really interesting and helpful evaluation out of that oftentimes. And we always call it, are you sure? Are we sure we want to do this? Are you sure you want to do that? You know, did you think about this? So that's extremely helpful. So our independent cost estimating came in, and overall we're looking good. There are always differences in opinions on different line items. So we're going through the detail and working through that, and also working with Chris on the higher level budget, just to make sure that everything's in line for all the projects, including your owner managed work with WTI. So we will be bidding this project in the spring, just like the others, and with construction slated to begin this coming summer at the high school, middle school campus. And as I already mentioned, we did have a constructability review with our in-house folks. What we're planning to do in January is a process we've done with some other districts is we will select a handful of high quality local general contractors and give them the same kind of opportunity to view the documents, take a look at the site and the campus, and make sure that they are clear in understanding the project, the scope, and most importantly, you know, the phasing. This is a complicated project of additions and renovations that happens over summers and occupied school years, and we just can't help them enough to understand that process. And it will definitely help because a bid period is short and they have a lot more things to do when they're bidding than worry about the nuances of the schedule. So this is their chance to think about that without the pressure of having to be putting bids together. So we often will give them that review. They will give us feedback. We make sure that, you know, we're all in agreement and that we think we've got the best plan laid out for going forward. And then hopefully one of these folks will be the low bidder on the project. That's certainly the ideal circumstance. So that's where we're at. We feel really good about our progress there. Last thing is we have been making some of our jurisdictional, our AHJ as we call them, submittals and have some approvals. So the elementary and early childhood site have already been submitted and are approved. The only thing that could change there is if we, depending on how the elementary playground shakes out, that could be a slight modification, but that would be extremely minor. High school, middle school plans were submitted. We expect to have comments back from MSD early in January. And that process is usually a 2 or 3 round review process. So we expect to be generally wrapped up with MSD about the same time as we would head out for bids, which is perfect timing. And then we have one more round of review with the ARB on the high school, middle school. It's not required that we do that until basically until we go out to bidding or into construction, but we'd like to go ahead and meet with those folks in February and make sure we've covered all the bases for them. We had a great meeting with them the first go round. We had a great meeting with the Board of Adjustment when we went for the variance. So we just want to keep the great relationship moving forward with the city. It's been a very amenable process for everyone so far. So last thing is on the address changes. They are largely done. You will have you have your current address and your new address, and the old addresses will stay active for a year in the county system, which will give you time to make the changes at the early childhood and the elementary to all your documentation. Also, what we're in the process of doing is we want to have 2 addresses on the high school, middle school campus. We need one for the district. We'd like to keep the Manchester Road address perpetually for the district and keep the new Lohmeyer address for the high school, middle school. That is extremely common. So we don't expect there to be any problem there, but we are waiting for the county's feedback on that. So that's the end of the report that Julie prepared for me to give to you. Are there any questions? No? Okay.
Todd,
Well,
actually,
again,
I do have
sorry.
one quick
Yes.
question. Sorry about that.
Francis.
And no, it's okay. It's a little speculative. So, you're not, you can always punt this a little bit, but one of the things that doesn't seem to have slowed down during the pandemic is construction projects. It just seems like there's a lot of work being done. Do you have any concerns about the bid process in terms of getting, a good amount of participation and enough people interested?
No, because I agree with you. Construction has been, I call it kind of a bright spot in pandemic, if you will. We have had isolated shutdowns on every one of our jobs. Inevitably there's an outbreak, but usually, it's isolated to a trade because a group of workers were together, say in an interior space, and it's unavoidable. So, but overall construction has been moving. However, there's a lot of work that stopped or slowed down outside of the public realm. So public works projects like schools, universities and things of that nature are still largely going along strong. But I will tell you that development type work, retail and such, a lot of that has died. So there are a lot of people out there looking for work, and they may not all be the typical, I'll call them public school contractors, but there are a lot of good folks out there who have expressed interest in this project and others that we're working on. So, and we are going out at the perfect time. The winter period is always when contractors are looking to build their backlog. And so we expect your bids to be competitive. This is a very nice project. It's a good size project. It's not too big to rule out, a whole group of small to mid-level GCs, but it's big enough that, you don't get the very smallest guys. So we really are in the sweet spot as far as that goes. So no, I don't think, obviously, no one has a crystal ball for 2021, but right now everything looks like we'd be in good shape.
Perfect. Okay.
I appreciate that. Yeah, there are some trades that are experiencing unique individual manpower shortages, but I think overall the industry is in pretty good shape and still looking for work.
Thanks again.
Sure. Anything else this evening? Okay. And if not, everyone, please have a safe and happy holiday season. We'll be back seeing you again in January and get this year behind us.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for keeping everything moving and for pinch hitting for Julie this evening.
Yes, I'm feeling for her. So,
yeah.
But she's on the mend. So
good. Glad to hear it.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. We can move on to our next agenda item, policy batch 2020A. Go ahead, Roxana.
Right. So this is just the second reading of the policies we talked about last time that were amended in some way. So really, there's not a whole lot to add unless you would have questions about any of them from last month.
Thanks for keeping us on track to review and approve those. We'll move forward. Chris's purchasing policy.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. First time we've talked publicly this evening. This is policy DK. And as we were reviewing policy batch 2020A, that caused us to take a look at some of our older policies and wipe the dust off of them, take a look at them. Policy DK is one that hasn't been touched in some years, and it's relatively innocuous, except for this is the policy that dictates when we pay folks. So a warrant or a bill to pay. So what we often encounter as a district is, with the district having one board meeting per month, we often get into a timing problem with some of our vendors. And that often disproportionately affects our smaller vendors, where cash flow is a little bit more immediately important. And we have noticed, especially in this current state that we're in, we are requesting that we get a little bit more flexibility such that we're able to pay folks prior to the approval of that bill on the warrant list, with the expectation that that is done under the circumstances that I outline here. So in general, bills will be authorized for payment only upon approval by the majority of the Board of Education, with the exception of the board now warrants may pay upon approval by the superintendent or designee. So an invoice not to exceed $7,500, or a cumulative set of invoices to a single vendor that does not exceed $10,000 per month. So we set a dollar cap and to put in some reasonable boundaries on that. Also invoices for utilities, principal and interest payments for duly authorized bonds and leases, and with the expectation that those payments appear in a separate line item on the warrant list on the next board meeting. So a perfect example of how this could play out, let's say we receive a bill, and in order to pay that bill without receiving a penalty, we have to pay that by a date that perhaps is prior to the board meeting. Therefore, we have a decision at that point. Do we violate policy and pay the bill and avoid the penalty, or do we take the penalty and pay the bill per policy? Another instance that we will often experience is we can receive a discount if we pay by a certain date that may precede the board meeting. So there again, the decision is binary. We can either choose to get the discount and violate policy, or wait and abide by policy and lose the discount, which subsequently saves taxpayers dollars. So that's the long and the short of this update to policy DK. I did work closely with the attorneys at MSBA to work through this. This is a fairly common practice amongst our local districts, just to give a little bit more flexibility in how we pay our bills.
Thanks for that, Chris. Appreciate that. Any questions? Seems pretty common sense. We'll take a look at that. Go ahead with the next item, Chris. Thanks.
Okay, so the next item is the Maplewood-Richmond Heights Building Corporation. The Building Corporation was put in place some years ago due to a state law that requires that anytime a school district cannot incur debt for real estate under its own name. So it has to use an outside corporation for that. So this was put in place for our lease purchase debt and for our certificates of participation. So since then, so our 2017 and 2011 issues were all executed under the building corporation. So the building corporation was then leasing us the property that we were then using for the debt to incur that debt. So the laws have changed such that the building corporation is no longer required, thus removing the need for the building corporation and the annual meetings and the annual filings and the costs to do so. This particular building corporation was responsible for the 2011, for the 2017 issues. Once that debt is retired, the building corporation no longer has a cause to stand. So I am requesting that the board vote to dissolve the building corporation, which will then kick off another series of events, but not the least of which is reconvening for one last time a meeting of the MRH Building Corporation Board that will also vote to dissolve itself, and then all the subsequent filings with the Secretary of State and other state organizations to record that filing in the record.
Just a little cleanup that needs to happen here with our compliance, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. Any questions? We're voting on that resolution this evening, I believe, right? All right.
Yes.
And you've got one more item here, the bus lease.
Okay, so the bus lease, our bus lease on our existing 8 buses is now concluded. We've made our last payment at the beginning of this year, fiscal year that is. So now it's time to put in place a new lease. This year is exciting in that we have some more options that are perhaps a little bit more environmentally friendly and green, as it were. Propane buses have reached the state of technology that they are now dependable, reliable, efficient, and significantly less expensive to operate. There's also some significant state and federal rebates in place that allow for annual grants in the form of cash because we have these buses, and also a per mile discount on the fuel. So I was fully intending to have all of those pieces in place for you to vote on a lease this evening. While I don't necessarily like moving things through the process that fast, we are under a little bit of a time constraint. Along with most things, supply chains are pretty backed up right now. So we need to get on that list to get our buses starting on the build process so that we can have them by the start of school. January is about the latest we could get on that list, so I'm comfortable with that. We have some details that we need to work out, not the least of which is how we're going to fuel said buses. We think we've identified a spot, but since we are in active construction planning phase, we need to coordinate with the architects and make sure that everything is in line. We talked with at least the city manager, and things are looking good from that perspective. My next communication will be with Brian Herr to make sure that there's nothing on the permitting side that we need to be aware of from the city's perspective. So right now it's looking positive. We will likely come to you with a lease proposal that will be for 4 standard gasoline powered buses and 4 propane powered buses. Of course, if we can't make the propane fueling station work for us, then we'll have to go with the gasoline buses. The diesel buses were proving to not be as powerful as we needed them to be, and gasoline technology has also become more efficient and quite a bit more powerful since the last time we did one of these leases. So working with Cindy Northern, AmeriGas, Central States Bus, who holds the Bluebird state contract, we are poised to get all these items in place and in front of you to vote in January.
I just wanted to compliment Chris on all of his hard work trying to look at greener options for the district. I think that's super important, and I know he's put a lot of time into that. So thank you, Chris.
Quite welcome.
All right, and I misspoke. You and Ed are up for the Lohmeyer traffic study too.
All right, Ed, I'll kick it off and you can bring it home. How about that?
Sure.
Okay, so as we've communicated in prior meetings, we are looking at, in the interest of safety and security for our students, our staff, and our visitors, to erect gates at the east and west property boundaries on Lohmeyer Avenue. The gate would be closed during school operating hours and during special events. We have worked with the city. We had a work session with the city council to go through some of the finer points and details of this. They came back to us with a list of requests, the things that they would like to see in order to feel comfortable moving forward with this plan. One of those things was a traffic study. We need to study the impact of this proposition on the immediate surrounding community. Lohmeyer is a through street that connects Martini and Laclede Station Road. So we need to make sure that anything that we do is not adversely affecting our neighbors. As we've been going through the COVID times here, it's been a little bit difficult to even anecdotally see what the traffic has been through because there's no students in session. So the traffic patterns are significantly different. So if we're able to come back in January, that will be a great opportunity for the traffic study firm to come out and evaluate that. Another aspect that we've discovered in the interest of safety is that we will be able to, we're studying the feasibility of queuing and loading our buses in front of the building proper, as opposed to having them sprawl down the street in front of the city library. That creates a bit of a safety situation that we closely monitor, but would be happy to remove. So putting those buses to load and unload in front of the school building in the confines of the safety of those gates would be an optimal choice for us. So the traffic study, as long as you agree to voting on that, we will likely get that kicked off sometime in mid to late January. and hopefully get that result in a quick fashion after that. Of course, there's other communications things that we need to engage in with the community, and I'll let Ed Rich talk to those.
Thanks. Good evening. My communications department will be creating an outreach campaign to our neighbors regarding this gating project. We will launch this after we have the results of the traffic study in hand. We'll be reaching out to citizens in the region, which is generally bounded by Lohmeyer, Burdell, Martini, and Rannells avenues. So in order to ensure that we're connecting with every household in the impact area, we're going to do this by hand delivering literature to mailboxes and front porches rather than a traditional paper mailing. I think this approach demonstrates our desire to continue being good neighbors in this part of town. The crux of the message will be that a gated Lohmeyer is a safer Lohmeyer, not just for students and school staff, but for the residents as well. You know, vehicles and young pedestrians inherently don't go together very well at times. So it's safer really for everyone in order to separate them. Also, diversions during the gating hours will really only add a minute or two of drive time in order to sidestep the Lohmeyer closure. Residents will be informed that we are creating a contact list. This is necessary for us to notify them of special events outside of school hours for which the gates will be closed. Our neighbors will receive both an email address and a telephone number to deliver whatever feedback they have on this project. And finally, we are planning a live virtual event for them to pose questions, not just to representatives of the district, but we're going to bring members of the traffic study team on board for that project as well. So that will be our approach. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any questions? I think that sounds like a very thorough approach.
I don't really have a question. I just maybe a comment. When we get to that point where we're engaging with the live or the virtual session with the community, I think it's super important that the council people for our area are present there as well, because oftentimes we get questions that are pretty technical about city, things that we just aren't answer. So I just want to make sure that we've got that on our radar screen, that they're there.
Thank you, Maria.
You're welcome.
Great, Ad. Anything else? All right, well then we'll move into admin communication and our COVID update from Roxana.
All right, so you know that every time we meet, we go over COVID data, and we've been doing the same thing at the staff town halls on Tuesday. As I'm reading comments from the surveys, and as you heard in public forum tonight, we have lots of folks with lots of questions about data and how we should think about data. And one of the privileges that I have is that multiple times a week, I am sitting in rooms with folks from the health department, other school districts, et cetera. So tonight I'm going to give the COVID report, but Chris, I believe Dr. Rachel Orschlin is also waiting to come in, and Paul Ziegler as well. Dr. Orschlin is a director of ambulatory pediatric infectious diseases at St. Louis Children's Hospital, and she's also a professor of infectious disease at Washington University. And Paul Ziegler, you know, is the executive director of cooperating school districts, which is now Ed Plus. I keep saying that wrong. Paul will be able to tell you what his title is. He's been leading the Superintendent's Council on Reentry, and he's also been leading schools reentry work group with the coordinating with the different health departments. And so they're here just to contextualize some of the data that schools are hearing in case you have questions of them. But I'll go ahead and do my report, and then we'll let Dr. Orschlin talk a little bit about data specific to schools. And then if you have any questions, we'll go from there. So this is the data that we look at every single time. This is the data that is positioned on the state of Missouri websites. I heard Spring Schmidt this morning in our meeting actually talk about summary of the data. And what we can tell you is that cases compared to the prior 7 days are down slightly. Case rates are still very high, and they still do exceed that CDC 14-day per 100,000 threshold. So we're looking at those. She did indicate that testing is up. You'll see that the transmission rate for the state of Missouri is below 1 for the first time in a long while, and the one for St. Louis County sitting at 1.08, which is what it was last report. I did change the new case rate table just a little bit. We have been calculating the 14-day per 100,000 average, and I've been reporting on it, but it's not been part of the table. So you'll notice, again, those raw case numbers, those are lower than they were for the same 7-day period last time. You'll notice that that still exceeds the CDC threshold for high risk category in the charts that they have published. Positivity rate, in terms of the positivity rate, you'll see those there, and I have lost my notes. They are down, but they are still higher than we would hope to see as a core indicator. Here's our zip code data. Our zip code data is sitting about the same as it was in the last report. I believe that it is down slightly for the 63117 zip code, and it's up by 1 for the 63143. School age case rate, you can take a look at those slides and you can notice what's actually going on with the case rates. You'll see that you know, the younger the student, the lower the case rates. That's been true for some time. Here's what the county put out in their last reports, and you'll notice that the axes are labeled differently, so it makes it a little hard to compare. But what you'll see are those rates are remaining relatively stable. They declined a little bit, they go up a little bit, but we're still looking at lower case rates for children in the St. Louis area. And we're trying to watch those to see what impact schools might have on those. And hopefully Dr. Orscheln can talk with us about that in a bit. Total number of positive cases within our boundaries went up by a couple from last report. Our total since March actually is 38. And you'll see that we did have at least one case in every age category since last week. Our total staff cases since March have been 15 cases. We do have one current active case among a staff member. And in terms of quarantine, we do have 7 staff members currently in quarantine and 3 students. And so I know that I reported to you last time that our contact tracing team has been very active in terms of trying to make sure that we are finding all cases, even if kids are not on campus. If they are our students, we've been trying to figure out what we know about them so that we have some accurate numbers. As I've told you, the COVID task force is actively looking at metrics in 3 main areas. We follow the county numbers that you just saw, and we do look at the CDC recommendations. Hopefully at some point, we're going to continue to see declining numbers to get us in those ranges that are not in the highest ranges. We also look at our mitigation efforts to make sure that we have the highest levels of mitigation. And as I've told you, as we've talked, the higher the case rates, the higher the mitigation measures, right? So there's a proportionality there of the extreme caution we have to take when case rates are high, which is why we have proposed a hybrid model, which will allow us to do maximum social distancing. And then the reason that we moved from a full day hybrid to a half-day hybrid is so that we could eliminate having to serve lunches at school, which is our understanding that that was a driver of on-school transmission that could be avoided if we do not eat on campus. And again, maybe Dr. Orscheln will talk with us a little bit about that when she makes her comments. And then the third thing that we look at are our own internal metrics. So it's going to be super important how many staff members and how many students we have that are either active cases or in quarantine, because it is feasible at some point that the county numbers look good, but we still might not be able to operate in a tier 2 because we wouldn't be able to staff the situation safely, or because we had enough quarantining among a particular group of students that we might have to quarantine a class or a building or the district. And so all of that works together And we have to look at all of those things in coordination to understand exactly what is the safest thing to do. And I'm going to stop talking now. I see Dr. Orscheln on the screen. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you're a very busy lady. If you'd like to talk about data specific to schools and perhaps contextualize what the CDC is saying, that would be very helpful. You're muted, I think.
Of course I'm muted. I don't know how many times I've done that. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk today about this topic that I've thought a lot about and have been working with schools really since the beginning of the pandemic, trying to understand the role of children, the impact of children on children of this pandemic. So just by way of background, again, we're talking about the novel coronavirus, which causes the disease COVID-19. And, you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, obviously we didn't know a lot about how this virus would affect children. Traditionally, children, young children in particular, often have a more severe course of illness from respiratory viruses. Think about influenza, think about RSV. So we did not know what impact this novel coronavirus would have on children. Fortunately, throughout the course of this pandemic, we've learned a lot. I mean, again, this is a novel situation, and we've constantly been in a situation of gathering data and learning new information. And overall, what we have learned is that children appear to be less susceptible to this viral infection. You know, any child from a newborn on can be infected, but they appear to have about half the risk. So for a given exposure, children, particularly less than 12 years of age, seem to be about half as likely to become infected. And about half of all infections in children really are truly asymptomatic. It also appears true that children seem to be less likely to transmit this infection. And overall, you know, by the state of Missouri, I won't go into this, really hammer home this detail or this data, which you've sort of spoken about already, is, you know, children make up a smaller percentage of total cases compared to what they make up in the population. And really, deaths among children throughout the country have been really uncommon and really less common than we see with other seasonal respiratory viruses. And again, this is data that you guys have seen tonight. You know, again, children most often have a very mild course of infection. 90% of children really fall into the category of either having no symptoms or sort of mild to moderate symptoms. And there's a couple reasons why this seems to be true. You know, children appear to have less of the receptor for binding this infection. They appear to be sort of trained based on experiencing other coronaviruses that we have in our community to that they can fight off this infection, and they also lack the other underlying conditions. So overall, for children, a much less significant infection. In the beginning of the pandemic, really nobody would have argued with the idea of shutting down schools. And that was because all of our planning as regarding pandemics really had to do with influenza. And for influenza, the flu virus, children really drive that infection, and you can really impact what happens in the community by shutting down schools because you really interrupt transmission and infection between children. But for this particular infection, related to how it affects children, schools and daycares have not seemed to have been a site where we see widespread transmission when mitigation strategies are in place. Now, if you put a bunch of kids together, like let's say in an overnight summer camp and nobody's wearing masks and there's, you know, shouting and singing, and transmission can occur in those situations. But what we have seen is even in areas in the beginning of the pandemic, like in New York City in the YMCA system, where the children of essential workers were brought together, we really have not seen a lot of transmission in those settings, particularly when there's certain mitigation strategies in place. And I'll go over that a little bit later. In our own community, we have seen that schools have been able to reopen really with little evidence of transmission among students. And another important point is school opening hasn't seemed to have driven community transmission. And this has been true both in this country and also in other countries where it's been carefully studied. When we do see transmission, we see what we see actually in the hospital too, where it's not generally from a child to an adult. It's really often that transmission occurs between adults in situations where the mitigation strategies have broken down. Let's say at lunchtime when people are eating together in the break room, or people decide to hold a potluck together because they want to spend time with their friends. That's where we see transmission primarily in the school environment, and it generally is not occurring in the classrooms. There was actually a study done by our community pediatricians. They looked at about 2,000 kids coming into their office. And really the main purpose of this study was to see, what symptoms tell us that a child is likely to test positive for COVID, and what kind of risk factors do they have, and so they really looked at the kids that both tested positive and those kids that tested negative. And one of the really interesting findings was that the children who were attending in-person schooling were about half as likely to test positive as those children who were engaging in virtual learning. And really, this is, again, just an association, but the theory is that children who are attending in-person learning are spending most of their day in a relatively controlled environment. The other children have been screened for symptoms, and the students are masked. And so there's little opportunity for spread of respiratory viruses in that setting, including the novel coronavirus. And this actually came out this week. The CDC actually looked at students who tested positive or were negative for the coronavirus. And really, they found that students who attended in-person learning were not more likely to have tested positive. It was really students who had been to weddings, parties, play dates, and gatherings in the community. And this really is in alignment with what we have found in our own community. And what we know about how this virus is transmitted. We actually know what strategies are most effective in preventing transmission, and schools have been really good at implementing these strategies. In the beginning of this pandemic, didn't think children really could wear masks all day, particularly young children. And I have been impressed and surprised and really awed by the degree to which children have done a better job in many cases compared to adults in really adhering to the mitigation strategies and preventing transmission. This is, again, just a slide looking at whether school reopening changed what happened in the community. And really, it shows that there was really no association between school reopening and transmission within these various communities. And, as we see community transmission happening at a high level, there were these metrics that were set forth. CDC had some metrics that they put in place. The Harvard Pandemic Resilient Schools Task Force had some metrics they put in place, but this was actually fairly early in the pandemic. And what we've learned going forward is that the school environment really does appear to be a relatively protected place. And when we see increased community transmission, we know that we will have cases of students who have been in school. We may have faculty members who have been in the school environment who later test positive. And we really consider an exposure someone who's been in contact with a person within 48 hours of their symptoms developing or of testing positive. And this was a study that looked at when those cases occurred in the school environment, and then they looked at the close contacts, those people who were within 6 feet for greater than 15 minutes. And then they did testing actually and screening for symptoms and said, well, how often does someone test positive who's been exposed in the school environment? And in this particular study, it was about 1% of the time. So 1 in every 100 people who was exposed to someone in close contact in a school environment tested positive. And interestingly, the state of Missouri, a group of about 83 school districts in Missouri have been collecting this data as they've been having in-person schooling. And again, they have had students who have come to school and have tested positive, and a large number of students who have been quarantined related to that exposure. And in this particular circumstance, very similar to what has been seen in published studies, about 0.7% of the time you have a student who will test positive who has had their contact related to schools. Greater than 50% of these schools, again, that are operating with these mitigation strategies in place, reported no positives amongst the students who were quarantined. So that's why I'm really impressed with you, even as you're having students in the virtual environment, you're tracking this information, because I think this is really the most important metric, is what is happening in the school environment. We know that we have widespread transmission in our community. Unfortunately, it's likely to stay that way for quite some time to come. We're very optimistic about the vaccine being rolled out, but we know that that's not going to have a huge impact on the pandemic for the remainder of the school year, most likely. And so we do know that when schools operate, though, with these mitigation strategies in place, we do not see widespread transmission in the school environment. And the types of strategies really that are most important are these screening of students for any symptom. And I'll tell you that one of the really interesting things as an infectious disease physician that we've seen in our hospital is we've seen a really profound decrease in other respiratory viruses in our community. And I really think it's because kids are in school, the place where they normally share respiratory viruses, but they're having these mitigation strategies in place. They're not coming to school sick anymore. They're wearing masks when they are at school. They're having some degree of distancing. They're having enhanced hygiene. They're operating in smaller cohorts, and we're just not seeing the transmission. So we are having record low amounts of RSV, record low amounts of influenza. And so it really has had an amazing impact on our school environment. One of my primary roles as a physician is taking care of children who have immunocompromising conditions. So that includes kids who have had transplants or are receiving cancer chemotherapy. And really, for many of those kids, this year will be one of the safest years to be in school because they're very susceptible to those other types of viral infections. And we really are seeing record low amounts of transmission of other viruses in our school environment and in our community. So I will stop there, and I'm not sure if it's possible for people to ask questions, but I'm happy to take questions if there are questions that have been submitted.
Do any of the board members have questions for Dr. Orscheln? Okay, thank you very, very, very much. Dr. Ziegler, are you on the call? I didn't know, Paul, if you wanted to just say a few words about anything that any of your observations from leading the task force.
No, in really my leadership is only creating a venue for people to share ideas. We're lucky that here in the region we have some wonderful leaders, and we've spent a lot of time together on both Wednesdays and Thursdays for the last 35 weeks. I think it's been on our Wednesdays. And what we've learned from that is we have a lot to share. We've had a lot of different experiences amongst all of our districts that range from people that are virtual to people that are back 5 days a week with full classes. And every community has been able to make choices that meet their community's needs, their physical space that they have to work with. And in doing so, have really met the needs of their students in their community by doing that. So our goal is to be a clearinghouse that whatever decision a district makes, that we help them really provide their students the greatest opportunity for success. So we've created the networks to share the information and hopefully, for our districts that gives them the real support and foundation they need to grant kids that access. So certainly I can talk to what different districts are doing, but I'll just leave it open for questions and certainly would be happy to do that.
Does anyone have a question for Dr. Ziegler?
I do. Are you seeing much of a difference between the schools that are doing a hybrid model and those that have gone back full time?
I will tell you this, for our school districts, facility space means a lot for many of them. So I'm going to use a couple districts, not that they're perfect or not perfect, but just to give you an idea. So you have a district, South St. Louis, Hancock Place. Because of their facility space, they were able to bring all students back 5 days a week and remain in a socially distant atmosphere, allowing students that space they need, plus the other mitigating factors, and could do so given the resources they had from facilities. Take Wentzville, on the other hand, a district in St. Charles County, much larger, but also growing, that has space issues, meaning they can't build quick enough to keep up with the population growth. They have not been able to implement a full 5 day in many cases because they don't have the space to have all students at school physically distanced and the other mitigating. So that's kind of the, two, but you also have a Francis Howell or a Lindbergh, where they have implemented a varying amount of hybrid and full 5-day-a-week schedule. So again, every district has been slightly different. I don't know that I have two districts that are identical, but what I do know is that each of them has made decisions based on their resources, community needs, teacher needs, staffing patterns, and other things that have really allowed them to make decisions that work for their community.
Well, I just wanted to publicly thank you for being a great leader and making sure that those connections happen. I know that that's been super helpful for all of us as we learn from each other. And also to thank Dr. Orscheln and Dr. Newland gave his time on Tuesday to meet with the staff. So we're just very appreciative of and all the folks from the health departments that continue to meet with us, because this is incredibly challenging. We're seeing data come from multiple sources. All of it is scary. And none of it has been good. And so as we try to make sense of those things, I just appreciate having some thought partnership with others in the region. And so thanks to both of you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Orscheln, I think you can stop sharing your screen.
Appreciate the opportunity to see the connectivity across the region, and for you making the time this evening. I know we get the digest from both Ed Plus and from the infectious disease doctors through Roxana, but appreciate the opportunity to hear directly from regional leaders.
I have a question, if I may, Katie.
Go ahead.
Roxana, I'm looking at the CDC indicators and thresholds for risk of introduction and transmission of COVID-19. And we've talked about this before, because I was asking you probably about 2 board meetings ago, like, what are you looking at? Like, how do we get back to 5-day a week? And you told me you were looking at this, and I was like, okay. And I call this the rainbow chart because it has all of the colors on it. All right. So I guess I want to understand, in the work that you have done tirelessly all this time, when we are talking about we are in the red, as far as the CDC has indicated, what red is, the highest risk level. Is it my understanding that even when we have all of our implemented strategies, or the mitigated strategies, I think that's what we refer to them, if we have those but we're in the red, then it is your understanding that it is still safe for children to be in school?
Well, so currently we have been in that red zone for a minute in the St. Louis area. And I actually asked this question to the health department this morning, and they heard me ask it. If we are in the red, then is it reasonable for schools to be open? Can we operate safely? The answer that I received from the county health department is it's reasonable. If we have significant mitigation strategies in place and we implement those mitigation strategies faithfully, which we fully intend to do and have been doing in our in-person interventions. So safety is a relative word, right? That means different things to different people. Dr. Orscheln, I see she's popped back on. I think from the data that has been presented from a variety of people into our work groups, what we're understanding is that schools can create conditions of safety, and that the higher the community risk, even when we're in the red, means we have to be even more diligent about the mitigation strategies that we're performing at school. But if we do that with regularity, then schools are relatively safe places. That is my understanding. Dr. Orscheln, is that an accurate understanding?
that's a very accurate understanding. And, you know, this is, we've heard echoed from across the country. We have gotten together, Dr. Newland and I, he convened a group of our infectious disease experts across the country who really have been interfacing with schools and had an interest in school reentry. And we've heard that same thing, even in areas with very high transmission. We do not see transmission within the schools for the most part when the mitigation strategies are observed. Now, you know, when kids get together outside of school, sometimes there can be a cohort that experiences infection. Kids get together for parties, those sorts of things. But actually in school transmission is very rare. And, you know, many schools in our region have been operating in person, including many of the independent schools. In fact, most of the independent schools are operating in person. And we just really do not see transmission in the school environment when the mitigation strategies are in place. When the CDC set that guidance, it was actually before we really understood a lot and had the evidence we have. We had information from other countries, but we really now had a whole semester of school in session with pretty high levels of community transmission. And again, the school environment has really been a place where we have not seen transmission. Now, there will be exposures. Okay, so we talked about that, where, you know, a student's going to be present in school who the next day may have symptoms and test positive. That will mean there will be quarantines. And the idea of setting up in a hybrid model really probably has the most impact on reducing quarantines, because even operating with as little as 3 feet between students is probably very safe for reducing transmission when masks are worn, screenings done, cohorts are kept smaller. But really that larger distance is really necessary to reduce quarantines among students. And that's going to happen more often when you have higher levels of community transmission and more people developing the infection in the community.
So Roxana, thank you for that, Dr. Orscheln. Roxana, I just want to, let me back up. I want to touch on what Francis asked many months ago. And he asked us to consider getting to a point where you and our other administrators are making this decision. And that we are no longer involved in this because you all are at the helm of this. And I would like for you all to be at the helm of this. So I guess in talking about that, what I would like to get clear on is, can we, and I guess I'm asking this of the other board members, can we figure out like a way where whatever we are going to vote on in January is going to lead to our administration taking the helm of this and moving forward? For me right now, that looks like, are we going to follow the CDC indicators and thresholds for this risk? Or are we going to allow there to be a modification to it in that we could, our region, our area could be in the red, but because we have mitigating strategies that are going to take place, it's okay for us to go into the building with these mitigating strategies. And then vote on what we're going to do with that. So then Roxana can lead us, and if anything, just come back and say, okay, here are the COVID numbers, and this is how everything is going well, or these are the COVID numbers. And, you know, because of the way that you all voted, we will no longer, you know, we're going to stay in virtual because you didn't vote to, you know, amend the implemented strategy section of, you know, the red section of this table. So I want to just talk to the board and get some clarification on that, so we can be set, and our community can know, like, okay, this is what we're looking at.
I'd like to address that, Nikki. Kind of a while ago, but even now, what I was kind of thinking about was voting more so on what are we following. So if it's the CDC guidelines or whatever it is, okay, that's what, or the combination, because I believe Roxana gives us like 3 different combinations. And so that's what we're following. And if it's at a certain level, then we're doing a certain thing. And that's not something we have to continuously vote on. That's something that the administration is, you know, they recommended these guidelines, we voted on them, and so they're just following that. And I believe I stated, and this was a couple months ago, what if we were to have a situation where the numbers got too high, even in school, quarantining wasn't working, and we needed to revert back to a different model, but would they have to wait till we could set a special meeting, et cetera? And so I do have confidence in our administration, but I don't know what that looks like. I'd be open to suggestions from the administration about what they would want.
Well, what I really would like, and I am working really hard with the task force that you've put in place and the entire administrative team. So we meet every Monday morning. We look at the same things you're looking at. We are talking to the medical community and the health departments. You saw some data today that we did not have 2 months ago, reliably. Or at least that I was unaware of. Maybe we had it and I have not been part of those rooms because someone else had been attending those meetings. And so that has colored the way that I'm thinking about it, along with talking of our colleagues in other school districts. So what I would like, honestly, is to bring you a solid recommendation that has the unanimous support of your building leadership as well as your COVID task force, and give you the reasons why, and have you vote anytime we're moving into a less restrictive tier, but give me the ability to move us into a more restrictive tier within 24 hours if I believe that we need it. Because nobody wants, the reason we have a tiers plan, as unsatisfactory as it is for those of us that like stability and that like certainty, the reason that we have a tiers plan is so that we can be incredibly responsive to our current conditions, whether those are community-wide conditions or whether those are internal school conditions. And I actually spoke with a superintendent today at length who's been in school for a minute. And what he said was one of the valuable things after they actually moved into their hybrid model was they were able to see their data sets move, and it actually helped him make decision making. The hardest move is moving in, because you are, basing that on the data that you have available. That's not necessarily you. When we're in, we've been tracking every kid, even that isn't with us, but there's this fear that the numbers will change when we're actually on campus. And so I would like the board to vote to move to a more restrictive tier, because I think it's super important that the community knows that we've deliberated and that, we are taking a step together. But I need the ability to move us to more restrictive, because I might have to do that very quickly if our internal numbers move, if that makes sense to you at all.
That makes sense. Brandy, what I understood was you wanted some type of, I don't know. What I understood you were saying, Brandy, was you are looking for some type of guidelines that Roxana and our administrators are going to look at when making, the recommendation to do certain things, like to go into the hybrid model, or to go into the school tier 1 and children are in the school 5 days a week. But maybe I'm wrong. Is that correct, Brandy?
Yes. I was thinking of some type of guideline that we can articulate to the community, that we can look at and understand, but that also gives Roxana the ability to, yes, go into restrictive or less restrictive when those guidelines are met. But we still understand how it's happening, per se. Yes.
Yeah, and Brandy, I mean, I've been in that, mindset with you too, of like wanting to know clearly these are the exact things that will virtual decision, or these are the exact things that would trigger a hybrid decision. I think as we've gotten further into this, I'm, recognizing that, there are data points that are super important in combination, and there are data points that are super important if they individually spike. I think, I could imagine a situation where our community spread, looks good, but if there's, negative hospital capacity, is that a situation where we would feel comfortable having, all of our students back in buildings? I don't know. And that's, not a metric that we've said is like a defining factor, right? For us, it's certainly a consideration, but in and of itself, that might cause me pause in a return sort of decision. So I totally feel the frustration of community members and staff and other board members and in myself of like, what are the three things that we have to look at to know, like red light, green light, sort of thing. And I'm sitting with that ambiguity a little bit and trying to recognize that it's complicated. And I know that we're talking about something that's super important and super personal and super charged for the community too. And so I don't take that lightly. And I also feel okay saying it depends.
Katie, you gave an example of the number of hospital beds that were available. That's on the CDC guideline chart that I'm referring to. It's a secondary indicator. And so that's why, I am definitely not, I am not where I was in July, in October. As some community members are aware that have reached out to me via email, I have said, earlier in this semester that I would like to see our region under 1. And now I'm like, that is not going to be our reality. So, we need to, I need to evolve from that and look at other things. A community member asked me, do that. I did that. And so I'm like, okay, we're not going to be under 1. And now I'm looking at this CDC chart and I'm like, okay, there are ways for us to be in the school if we're in yellow. And I'm just really focused on us being in red. And what are we going to do then? And so that's why I'm like, can we at least, look at this with all of the data points that they give us? We're following it anyways. If we are going to make an adjustment to it, which is, for example, being in the red, but having mitigating strategies, can we, take a vote on that? Just so it's clear, because I appreciate and respect our administrators and our building leaders and you all being able to meet every week. But I want to make sure that the entire community can also see okay, you all have met, you all have looked at this data and you're putting it against this. And it's not 3 metrics. It's this entire grid that the CDC is created. So I'm just trying to get us to a point that's like that. And if I'm the lone, voice in that, I totally understand. But I just wanted to be clear. I don't want it to be what it was in October.
So what I think I hear you say, Nikki, and Vince, if you wanted to say something, but what I think I hear you say, Nikki, is you want to be clear that we're saying if we return while the community metrics are in the red, that would mean that our internal numbers have to be low and our mitigation has to be extremely high. That's right. That's what you're looking for. And I'm very comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable with that. And I think later when you see the draft of the Return to Learning handbook, I think for each tier it does not maybe as explicitly as you would like, but it does kind of spell some of that out as our recommendation, because that would be my recommendation. We can't have high community spread without the highest form of mitigation within the buildings, which includes hybrid social distancing, we got plexiglass on all the student desks, like all kinds of things that we would not normally be doing. That's essential. And our internal numbers would have to look good for that to happen. If the community spread numbers go down to the orange or hopefully yellow, then we can talk about what that might look like if we had more kids on campus, but certainly not until. So it does balance in that way. I think there's a way that we can say something like that would be very clear, but it's still going to have the nuances Katie said, because it's not going to be this number or this line, because so many things have to work in tandem. But I think if you think of those three factors, our internal numbers, our external numbers, and our mitigation strategies, we can be very clear that if the external numbers, the CDC charts, are very high, then our mitigation measures have to be at its highest level, which includes full hybrid, you know, all the things, all of the many things that you've heard me talk about.
I think generally what I'm trying to get to, forgive me, Francis, what I'm really trying to get to is I would like to see a recommendation on a thing, right? And not on an idea. If to me, for me, I just don't want it. I do not want it to be like it was in October.
Nobody does.
You know, okay, right? And I know you don't. And so I'm trying to look for a solution. Like, okay, can this be different? How can this be different? Can we have something where we're like, okay, we're looking at these guidelines, and we are voting to follow them. And it doesn't matter if we have mitigating strategies. If we're in the red, you know, we're in virtual. Or we're looking at these guidelines, and this, you know, says we're in the red, 0 strategies are being followed, but we are following strategies so we can still go into the building. That's what I'm looking for, because I don't want our administrators, I don't want you to feel like you've done all this work for naught. I really don't think the vote is going to be the same anyways, but I'm just saying, like, I'm really trying to just focus on a thing and not, you know, a recommendation that feels like it could be personal. I'm sorry, Francis. Thank you for giving me that
You're
time.
fine. You're fine. And I've stayed quiet because obviously, you know, we voted differently last time, and, you know, and I understand you need to kind of, I wanted to hear from other board members as to how they felt about this, because I want to see how that thinking is evolving. But I mean, I just wanted to jump in and say, I think that this is the operationalizing of that process right in front of our eyes tonight. And what Roxana has been doing, I think, has been bringing data to the table, but then tonight bringing qualified experts to the table as well with their own sets of data that I think are, you know, transcend just our district. And I think that expert analysis, in addition to, you know, a consistent sort of drumbeat on monitoring the things that we've identified as important, help explain when there's fluctuations in things. To me, it's a synthesis of a lot of different pieces of information. And if one is out of whack, like in the red, we have to understand how the other ones are compensating for that, and how that then fits in with the overall data that experts, health experts who have the degrees and, you know, study this on a day-to-day basis are, you know, advising schools, advising Roxana, and advising kind of the community on how to act. And for me, that sort of expert analysis is important. It's just the best use case to follow. It's not a great decision, and I wish it could be boiled down to simple sort of arithmetic around kind of these numbers have to line up to get this outcome. But I think it's a lot more complicated than that. I don't know if it can be made much more clear than that in terms of the rationale, you know, that people are using to make the decisions within the administration, within the district. You can disagree with that decision. That is your right to do so. But I think as long as we continue on this path, I would not really change how Roxana and the team is sort of delivering the information, because I think it does give us a perspective on where they're coming from that. And I think everybody has the ability to sort of determine whether or not, you know, they're going to agree with that. And there are mitigating strategies for disagreeing with that, or staying virtual, or that kind of thing. But I appreciate kind of the synthesis of the information. I think it has been a lot clearer since that vote in October. And I think the last few months, and tonight especially, really helped drive home kind of how Roxana and the team are kind of making those decisions with tons of data and a lot of uncertainty, and sort of also having to worry about the holidays and forward thinking and spikes in cases and a lot of other things that are really beyond our control for the region. So I just wanted to mention that.
I also, Francis, think that there's so many things in place now that were not back then, and that I can articulate, hey, this is our PPE, like Roxana has educated me on, when we have to have it at our highest level when we're in the red, and things like that. You know, Roxana, I'm visualizing a flow chart. Never thought I'd say this because I don't really like flow charts. But I am, you know, in my profession, one of the things that we do is, if this, now look at this. If this is here, then you need to go there. You know what I mean? That's what I'm thinking, because like Katie said, you do have to be able to look at all these different factors, and depending on where those factors are, that determines where we go next. And I don't think it has to be a finite, okay, this is such, so this is such. But look at this. Now, if that's, like you said, if this is in the red, then you need to look at this. And where is that at? And if that's, you know, also bad, then hold on, we need to go here. What do you think about that? Is that something that's possibly doable?
It is possibly doable. I have to think on it. And again, to Francis's point, I don't think this is something that can be oversimplified. And I think I say this because I have read, at this point, it would not be an exaggeration to say thousands of comments. People send me data. People send me data from other counties. People send me news articles. People send me opinions. It is super complex. And I don't want anybody who might be listening at home to think that we're taking this lightly, or just, you know, a ringer for one side or the other, because it's really not about that. It's about trying to figure out how to deliver high quality education, how to do that safely, how to minimize other health risks, disparities, all the things that, you know, that we talk about ad nauseum, and that everybody on this side is losing sleep over on a regular basis. So I think there's a simple way to talk about the decision making in a flow chart, but I don't think that I don't think there's any way we can make those factors simple, because they're just too many variables. When you have a whole lot of variables, it gets a lot more complicated to try to make any kind of simple tracking, which has been our dilemma in this from the get-go. And people like Spring and Dr. Orscheln and Dr. Newland and Dr. Garza and all these folks that we're depending on for information, as they get better information, they're sharing it with us. What Rachel didn't say to you is we've got a group of, I think they said today, like 20 school districts that are part of a Daugherty study, and they're collecting data in our own neighborhoods. So if that data comes back telling us something then we see differently right now, we're going to pivot and do the very best thing we know to do in that moment. But my goal right now is to give as many options that as we can, to try to meet the many needs that we have in our communities, because everybody has factors. Every kid is reacting to this differently. Like, I have literally read every line of the survey, everything that's come to me. I've talked to students, I've talked to parents and teachers. And the one thing that has rung true to me is every group thinks somehow they're not being heard, because there isn't a way to do this perfectly so that everybody gets every single thing that they need. And it is literally heartbreaking. It is literally heartbreaking to read it, because you know every person that is calling you and talking to you and sending heartfelt messages is doing that for a very specific reason that is a true reason for them. And so that was that. I didn't mean to get on a soapbox, Brandy. Yes, I think we can put together a flow chart, but I don't ever want to trivialize this. And I don't want anybody at home thinking it's a gimme that we're on a march to full attendance, or it's a gimme that we're all virtual. Like, we got to weigh all of those things every day, because we have kids that are in desperate situations right now. And we have kids that have significant health risks that really probably shouldn't come to school, and we've got to figure out ways to make it work for all of them. And so that's what the team is trying to do. I wanted to just bring along some friends tonight who I know have been working at this diligently since March, so that you could hear some voices other than me, so that you can kind of get a smattering of what I hear all the time that maybe everybody else doesn't get to hear.
And thank you so much for that. And our families, they are suffering. And I know that each and every one of us really, really cares about them. Thank you.
We do. And if I could just, I want to throw in a thanks to Roxana here, because I think we as a board collectively have seen a far more organized and measured synthesis since the last time that we had to make a decision on this. And Nikki, I hear your point about, can we, I'm going to say authority to Roxana, but you know what I'm saying is that we go based upon the recommendation and then let her make the, kind of guide us. That is what I'm looking for. That is where I feel as if, these are the experts within the building that understand what mitigation looks like. Of course, now we've been told, we've seen examples, we've seen pictures. And, obviously we're going to hear more presentations tonight from our high school, middle school. We've heard from ECC and elementary, but I want to give that to them because as much as this is about science, it's also an art in trying to figure out how to mitigate and come to these decisions. And I think Roxana, you and the task force team have done a really good job of being consistent with us since October and what you're reporting, and appreciative of that, and appreciative to our friends at Ed Plus and Dr. Orschland for being part of this as well. So thank you.
I would just like to point out that kind of what we're discussing here is a change in what we were planning to do a couple of months ago, which is to work off this data. Because if we're going to say that we're going to go to school when we're all in the red, when previously that wasn't what we thought we were going to be doing, that's a change. Now, I'm not saying I'm against it. Data has changed. The information has changed. The facts we understand have changed. And so it is time for us to consider changing the way we look at this situation. But I want us all to realize we are changing that now with this new idea. We are moving from external sources of data to verify whether our mitigations are working to internal ones, in which the only way we'll know we failed is if someone gets sick. I'm not saying the data's wrong. I'm not saying that Dr. Orschland isn't absolutely right. Schools are a much safer place to be, but I think we all need to recognize we're changing our mindset.
I agree, Wes, and that's what I'm asking for. I'm like, can we vote on this so this is clear? And I agree with Maria as well. As I agree in part that I think that this needs to be with you, Roxana. I hear what you're saying, and of course I respect that. This needs to be with you and your building leaders. I think I am fine. Like okay, to what Wes said, we are changing. Okay, are we going to vote on that? Like, are we going to change from what we had been working with? And if we're going to do that, let's vote on that and then say, okay, Roxana, we're changing this. Here you go. Here's the helm. Row forward. That's where I'm at.
I think it's a difference of where the strategy is coming from. We set out some benchmarks that we kind of made up as a board that we thought what we wanted to see that would help make us the decision for us. We're learning tonight that that's not simply the right paradigm or structure in order to make this complex decision. And what's happened since that vote and today is from the bottom up, from Roxana, her administration, her team, the experts that she's been dealing with. We're now given a more complex rubric on which we have to make that decision that still encompasses the data. It still has some of the aspects of what we had that first time. It's just not as simple as a color-coded sort of number system with strata that tells us what to do. And personally, I'm more comfortable with that because I think it's coming from a place of much more structural and integrity and much more understanding of what's happening on the ground level within these buildings, within, with these kids and how other districts are working on it. I am totally uncomfortable as a board member, individually myself, coming up with criteria to help make this decision because I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not an MD, and I'm not in these buildings every single day. So, I don't want to be the one that has to come up with that. I want that to be presented to us the way it has been, I think, through Roxana and her team with this sort of rather complicated. It's not as simple. So I'm not saying that's easy to digest. We have to decide if that's if we're comfortable with that and we think that they have stuck to that with fidelity and that they've brought us something that, you know, they can adhere to and actually make a decision for the best interest of our whole community. I personally think that they can, but
I understand, Francis. I think respectfully, you and I just disagree. I'm not making up any new data points or saying that we should look at anything different. I'm just saying I would like for us to focus on the CDC rainbow chart, if you will, and then decide like, okay, what are we doing with this? And then go from there.
Respectfully, I don't think we're making up new data. I'm not accusing anybody of making up new data. I'm saying we came up with 3 or 4 or 5. We came up with these different criterias based on, but we did that. And I think what Roxana has sort of had to deal with is that that's much of that still is the right data to look at, but there is much more complexity to actually coming to a decision point on the tiered system that really involves, you know, other dimensions that we just don't have insight into, and we would have to, if you want to call it changing our perspective, that's fine. To me, that change is coming from an informed source within the district that's sort of assimilating a lot more information than we probably had an appreciation existed or didn't exist at the time for us to make that decision.
Right. So when Roxana, sorry, Wes, when I asked Roxana, because I remember you said you made a comment when I'd asked Roxana, like, what do we need to do to get back in 5 days? And then like Roxana had said something like, oh, you know, you're trying to get me caught up. And I was like, no, I'm not. I just want to see what you're looking at. And she directed me to the CDC rainbow chart that I am referring to. She did that. So at that point, I was like, okay, because up until that point, I had been asking, like, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? And, you know, we would just get this raw data. And so when Roxana pointed me to that, everything was clear for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I understand everything, on top of like how she synthesized information for us and presented it to us. I was like, okay, I understand everything that's going on. And so from that point forward, you're right, Francis, like we're getting all of this new information. She is getting even more information, tons of it by the day. We know more. I admit to that. That's why I'm saying like, hey, I'm not waiting for us to be in the green to get back into the buildings. But I'm just saying now it seems like we had this understanding that we were following this. I had it. How about that? Because this is what Roxana told me. And now she's saying, you know, I have more information. And even in red, we can go back. And that's what I'm saying. Can we focus on that? Can we vote on that? Yeah. And I understand what you're saying, Francis, because you're like, I don't need that. I just need, you know, for this administration to come to us because they've been talking, they're on boots on the ground. They understand what's going on. So I get that.
I'm just concerned if we bracket it with some specificity, too much of that doesn't give them the flexibility if there's new sources of data or there's new ways to look at this, that, you know, they're hamstrung by a process that we defined. And I'm just saying I'm not comfortable defining that. I'm much more comfortable with that being defined by practitioners who are kind of in the field. You know what I'm saying? I don't think we're really disagreeing.
Yes, I do.
But I just what I heard from this board was we need defined sets of metrics on how we're going to make tiered decisions. And here they are. Roxana, go. If you can't give us those, then we can't vote. And I'm saying that the issue is, I think, more complex than that. And to hamstring the administration under a set of criteria that changes based on new information and, you know, time and all kinds of other things and ways to measure it, we need to give them much more freedom to operate, to be able to say, you know what, we had X, Y, and Z but there's a couple others, W and others that we have to start bringing in because we now know more. And that's going to help us make a better decision. So, I mean, I think we're saying the same thing. It's just a matter of how you phrase the resolution and what we want to vote on going forward, you know, in the January meeting.
Francis, as someone who voted no, Roxana educated me, this was after the vote, about some of the other things she was looking at, which made a lot of sense to me and really helped put in perspective why being in the red doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't go back. because there were mitigating factors, as she calls them. And before I didn't understand those mitigating factors and what they were. We had focused so much on the data, which is just as important still today. So having that full picture really does help me understand where we're at and where we're headed, and I've always felt confident in our administration, but just feel confident in my vote. And so that, I think, makes a huge difference in, okay, when we're in the red, we need to make sure that we're distanced, that we're, we can't do necessarily a 5-day because of that factor. So I'm actually understanding more those things. And you're right, it's always going to be complicated. And I feel like they are in a better position to do that. We're listening to the experts and trying to make the better decisions for our kiddos. So I appreciate everybody on here and all the hard work that everyone has put into it.
Any other comments, questions? Well, again,
one last thing. This is hard, and we know it's hard, right? But I'm going to go back to I just am very grateful that this has had a family approach, but also that we are hearing more about our students. And I've said that in past meetings because oftentimes it was very staff focused and very parent focused. And I understand why. I'm not discounting that at all, but I am glad to hear the students being mentioned more and more in this conversation, especially at a board level, and just being mindful that and to remind the community that first and foremost, what we want to do is best for the kids. And I personally believe that the administration has done a good job, and also really appreciate bringing in the experts, and that it is positioned with leading students first. So I think that's just something we just always have to keep, recentering ourselves on.
Well, thanks again, Dr. Orscheln and Dr. Ziegler. Good to have you with us. And if there aren't any other comments on this agenda item, we can move forward. So the COVID dashboard is next. Ed, I think that's you.
Okay, I hope you can see the homepage of the website. All right. The MRH COVID-19 dashboard debuted 10 days ago. It is easy to locate after clicking the bright yellow bar on the homepage as follows. And then you're here. There we go. The purpose of this feature is to provide families and staff with a transparent summary of COVID-19 related positive cases and exposures. The dashboard is updated weekly on Mondays, or more frequently if necessary, based on contact tracing information from our own internal data and from St. Louis County Department of Health reports. Here's what it looks like. So we'll start with the MRH sourced graphics. Those blue circles simply represent total employment and total enrollment. That figure for students does not include pre-kindergarten because that program is on hiatus, as we all know. The red circles represent active positive cases. Positive case, of course, indicates that the student or staff member has been tested and received a report confirming that they have COVID-19. Those individuals will be isolated for a minimum of 10 to 14 days, and upon being released by the health department, may return to school or to work. That figure that you see in gray is the percentage of active positive cases among both groups, students and staff. It's reading 0.17% right now. I think that actually should have been rounded up to 0.18, but it's accurate enough, I think. The yellow circles are data for quarantine. These are individuals who have not tested positive, but have been identified through contact tracing or have been directed by the St. Louis County Health Department to quarantine due to exposure. Individuals who have been exposed are typically instructed to quarantine for 2 weeks to monitor for symptoms. The chart of cumulative cases tracks by grade levels corresponding to buildings the total number of students and staff who have tested positive for COVID-19 or have been quarantined from exposure since August 24th. We selected that date because it represents the time when staff began filtering back into buildings on a wider scale than during the summer. We also did have an all-staff event in the Commons that week as well. Everyone behaved, as I recall. And the staff bar there on the right does include central office and buildings and grounds.
Can I just interject here, Ed, too? This is including anyone who has COVID or who would need to be quarantined. To date, we've had no known transmissions on campus. We would love to keep it that way. So I just want to be clear that what you're seeing is anyone that's reported that is asked to quarantine or that has COVID. This is not related specifically to any kind of transmission on campus.
Thank you. All right, a quick look at the next two charts, which are sourced with data from the St. Louis Education Task Force. This first one represents the percentage of positive cases out of all tests given in the last 2 weeks within MRH school district boundaries. It's broken down by age groups. As you can see, those three middle bars are showing us that the preponderance of positive cases is basically among those 25 to 54. And lastly, this busy little chart shows us 7-day case rates per 100,000 population in the entire county of St. Louis. Now it's dated December 8th, just because we don't always get updated numbers as frequently as we'd like. The great feature about this chart is that you can hover over the tiny little lines like that. There are 13 of them sorted by age groups, and you can read a pop-up with all the details, including a percentage breakdown for a specific age group. So I hope everyone finds this dashboard useful and practical and easy to use.
And that's going to be important. We want to be as transparent as we can to the community. I've just told you, like, if we think of the 3 buckets of data that we need to look at, the county data we'll keep reporting, and we will be looking at that against the CDC indicators. This internal data is also equally important, right? We need to know what we have going on in the district. We need to be transparent about that so that folks have a comfort level and they also have an understanding of recommendations that might be outside what's going on the countywide data. If, for example, if we had to quarantine, even though the county data looked good.
What's our estimate, like how often could this be refreshed and updated?
We do it every Monday. And the reason that we do it every Monday is we also are working very closely with the health department, and Vince Estrada actually is the aggregator that submits the county health department report. And so the nurses and the HR team make sure that all the data is clean on Friday, so that Phoebe McVeigh, who's my assistant, can actually update it into this chart. And then Vince also takes that data and makes our report to the health department. They're a very important partner in all of this. And I want to say that to you. And I want to make sure everybody listening at home knows this is not my team making decisions in isolation. Every single decision we make about quarantine, every single decision we make about notifications and whether or not we shut things down, we are talking to the health department on a regular basis and asking for advice, because again, we are not the experts in the health related field. And so we're relying on them very heavily for their advice about what is okay to do. And if we need to move in and out of tiers, we're going to do that very quickly based on what we're seeing in these numbers and the advice that we're receiving.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I think that is helpful. Thanks for walking us through that, Ed. Appreciate that. We'll move forward then to the COVID leave resolution.
So up to date, since about March of last year until December 31st, the federal government had a provision that provided COVID sick leave to employees who had COVID-related absences, as well as the Family First Coronavirus Act, which allowed for some family care for school closures. That is set to expire on December 31st, and we have had no word whether or not that would be renewed. At this point, we're very close to December 31st, and I'm afraid that it might take a minute for the federal government to do anything. Meanwhile, I do have employees who have significant concerns. We have heard from a number of staff members, and again, the survey results, they have expressed concerns in a wide variety of areas, including leave. They're really worried about what happens if they get sick and they don't have enough leave balances. I'm asking you to pass this resolution. I think it's important. The resolution extends the Corona sick leave specifically through your proclamation internally in MRH, irregardless of what the federal government does through the end of the school year. So what that would essentially do is guarantee employees at least 10 days of sick leave that could be used if they have symptoms of coronavirus, if they are if they would contract the virus, or if they are asked to quarantine based on any of those factors, any of the things that we typically encounter when we're dealing with staff and coronavirus. I feel like that's a very important thing for the district to do, and I think that that's something that the staff would greatly appreciate and help to relieve at least some of the anxiety that they feel.
Roxana, I am definitely in support of this. My only concern is that it is a resolution instead of, I know why it's not a policy. I read the memo that was provided by MSBA, but I still just want to know a little bit more about that. So can we please have the district attorney to look over this and just give us a memo or something to that effect?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that resolution? Thanks for bringing up the legal aspects, Nikki. All right, then I guess we'll welcome Dr. Dietrich and Dr. Grauer.
All right.
Welcome, gentlemen. We look forward to hearing what the plans are.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. We'll get right to it. It's been a long night. Mike and I were talking about, how we want to look at this. And if you look at the second slide, Mr. Dietrich, we kind of talked about however we return, we want it to be like a warm blanket, meaning that people feel safe and secure in a blanket, but our blanket would be those mitigation strategies that were in our fidelity towards them. As Dr. Orson mentioned earlier, those things have to be followed to a T. And we aim to do that. These are definitely challenging times. And this is a quote from Zach Taylor, who works for the Santa Fe Public Schools, and that we can choose to spend our energy holding on tightly to the way things were, or we can use this energy to look for opportunities to innovate, create, and try new ways to engage students. And whatever capacity we return in, what we think we will do, because our staff is good at this, is we'll find a way to maximize our potential within that structure. And that's what we're charged to do as professional educators. And that's what we're going to push to do as best we can.
Right. So we have spent a lot of time as an admin staff and also talking with our own staff, middle school, high school, elementary ECC, really talking about what does it look like for the teaching steps. And we've got a good plan for teachers to have their classrooms ready to roll. Ideally, setting up a safe, clutter-free classroom space with proper social distancing and PPEs. Implementing daily personal health scans. That's the big thing. We're really going to rely on our families to make sure they're helping us with that. Address student belonging, social emotional needs, class culture, and COVID protocols. I can tell you that not a day goes by that I'm not on the phone with a parent who just says, please help. My kids at home, they're struggling. I was on the phone today with a family that just said, what can we do? Like, I feel like my child is kind of slipping into depression. And this is really kind of a common conversation we're having with families. And that's not to scare or anything. This is real. This is the truth. And this is what we're experiencing every day as administrators, and teachers are experiencing this. And then obviously the number one thing we need to do is provide quality instruction. Obviously, let's talk safety protocols and risk reduction. We've talked about having 4 non-negotiables. The first is social distancing. Number 2 is hand washing. 3, mask wearing, and 4, daily health screening. The one thing I will say about this, and we'll talk later about some things that teachers and administrators said from other middle schools and high schools, but on my way in this evening, my very short drive, I was talking with the principal at Kirkwood North, and they've been back in since November 4th. And he said that he has had to have 2 conversations since November 4th about students wearing masks, 2. And he said that, he truly believes his kids have been awesome, and he thinks kids can be awesome anywhere with this and following these 4 non-negotiables.
As Dr. Dietrich said, we want to keep everybody safe. And that's our first priority, of course, students, staff, everybody that comes in our space. So, we want to keep our school open as directed by the local COVID rates and what we know about school transmission rates already, which we've heard tonight, and per our CDC guidelines and protocols. Our goal obviously is to take good care of each other and to keep each other in mind. As Mike goes to the next slide, that daily self-check is vital because we're very interdependent in this world. Whereas if we show any of these symptoms in any way, shape, or form, we're going to ask you not to come to school, when we do come back. So it's important that people are disciplined enough and stick with it and not think, well, I think I'll be okay. No, that's not part of the deal. We need to be vigilant with this. And so we aim to do so. And part of that is, this is a self-check. So we're requiring the integrity of each individual to do that. And obviously, if we see symptoms and signs in school, we will deal with those accordingly. But most of the problems we've seen from the schools we visited, and I spent 3 different days in 3 different schools recently, have come from outside sources or students bringing things in from a different outing that they were at.
Right. So classroom protocols, this is something we've worked on because we understand that we don't have a custodian to assign to every single classroom, right? That's just not possible. So what we have talked about is, as students are entering the room, they're going to use the hand sanitizer before sitting. We're going to have the sanitizing wipes right there ready for them. And they're going to wipe off the desk when they walk into the classroom, but also when they leave. We want to build that habit of when you walk into a workspace, you're cleaning it. When you walk out of a workspace, you're cleaning it, because we're taking care of ourselves and we're taking care of the people that come after us, because we're in this together. So that was very, very important to us. And the worst case scenario with that is an area gets cleaned twice. Right. And we're okay with that. Obviously, you heard earlier about, 3 to 6 foot spacing on our desk. We have desks being put in classrooms right now. Every single room I've been in, I've been measuring them. They've been 6 feet. One thing we did do is we had our architects that are part of our building our new buildings here and all of our updates. We actually had them come through the middle school and high school, actually the entire district, and they use their CAD programs to design our classrooms to provide maximum space between the desk. So our classrooms are set up using their specs. So we feel very confident in that. Our desks do have plexiglass barriers. We have decluttered classroom spaces. The last couple of days we've been sitting in here watching new air handling units go on our roof. Which hats off to Mike Wieland. We were supposed to be out of the middle school Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday this week due to that. And we only had to be out on Wednesday. So thank you, Mike, for getting us back in the building so quick. But we're going to have much cleaner air in our spaces when students are able to return. So this is just a picture of what students are going to see when they walk into a classroom. You have your the giant jug there is your hand sanitizer, and those are in every single classroom. And then the refillable container there with wipes. And then you'll see to the left an example of the plexiglass that will be protecting our students.
Imagine the bell rings, you walk out in the hall and you'll see these directional signs. And our motto is going to be keep it moving, stay to the right. We've researched it, and there is a minuscule ability to, transmit COVID while moving in a larger space with masks on. And we've talked to schools, and they've been confident that the movement in the hallway has not contributed at all to that spread. So you'll notice in the right, there are lockers, but Mike and I have agreed that we're not going to be using lockers. We want to eliminate that opportunity to congregate. So when the bell rings and the class ends, you will simply go to your next class. And we will have adults, of course, in the hallways helping people get there and supporting them and making sure that everybody is moving safely through the building. This fine looking group of educators here is our contact tracing group, and they are members of our middle and high school and our nurse angel. We have all been formally trained in the Johns Hopkins contact tracing, which was about an 8-hour experience for all of us, a great learning experience in which we dealt with. And we've actually had to put this into place. And I'm sure Mike and Nurse Angel have had to do this multiple times, as I have, where we've had to, contact trace. If someone with symptoms was in the space, was somebody within 6 feet of them for 15 minutes over a 24-hour period? And if so, that person needs to be contacted, and we discuss quarantine isolation with them. By being proactive in this process and understanding it, we eliminate spread.
So we spent a lot of time talking with principals in other districts about what they're doing around buses. And it seems to be pretty universal. Obviously, students are going to be wearing a mask when they're on the bus. There is limited ridership per bus at this time. That number is 23 students. We will have sanitizer on the bus as they enter. We have the spray guns now. They're the electrostatic sprayers. Imagine Ghostbusters. It's pretty cool. You see the custodians with these, and they're spraying down the buses. And so no food or drink to be consumed on the bus. That's one of the things when we've talked with some students or schools, and Kevin will get into this a little bit more, but we're going to be providing some bag lunches and breakfast to students as they're leaving campus. And one of the things we need to make sure that we're educating the students on is that they really need to wait till they get home to dig into those lunches because they need to keep their mask on for the entire ride. And then one student per seat unless they are from the same household.
Just as a side note, food service informed us on Tuesday, I think, that a lot of the materials they're sending home for food will be frozen, that will need to be heated at home to discourage eating in those spaces. So even our food service staff is being really innovative in terms of thinking of ways to help us prevent unsafe situations.
Yeah, they shared that with us too, and we were very thankful for that. Arrival, students will use one of 3 entrances to prevent clustering. So those will be, there's the pictures here, the band door, the red cafe door, or the gym lobby door. One thing that we are really going to need to count on parents and students on is not arriving on campus more than 10 minutes prior to class starting. Our doors are going to be locked. We don't want congregating in the building. So example would be in the morning, our doors are going to open at 8:20. Students should not be on our campus before 8:10. That's about the same time buses will be dropping off. So 8:20, we open the doors, we get everybody in. They're going to head straight to their classrooms and begin learning. So again, just families, if when we end up back in school, we're just really going to ask that the students are not arriving 10 minutes prior to class starting. We really appreciate that.
As Dr. Dietrich said, lunch will not be served at school, but it will be served. And how is that going to work? Well, working with Irene and Chris in our cafeteria, we will have boxes ready to go at designated exits. So when they exit the school, it's their choice to pick a lunch, which also includes tomorrow morning's breakfast inside of it. And that will happen in both the AM and the PM session. So we will make sure we get kids their nutrients needed. And we believe that we have an exit in the north side of the building, which will be the outdoor commons area, and one on the south side for families that live to the south. So we can hit everybody as they exit the building. And we will be scaffolding, Mike and I, our dismissals so that we aren't exactly all coming out at the same time at that final bell.
Right. One of the things, sorry, Dr. Grauer, to interrupt, one of the questions that we get from parents are, are they going to be standing in line and giving their numbers, and are they going to be congregating? And that's a really good question. And we ask that. And because our food service has applied for a waiver, all they need to do is tally how many are taken. So if your child walks through line, they're not going to be congregating. We're going to keep them moving and get them towards the buses, towards the cars, or walking home. So we will keep those students moving.
And this data is just our students, both of the high school and the middle school. We polled our kids and just wanted to know, do you prefer being at home or in school? And obviously the overwhelming amount, 85% of middle schoolers and 75% of high schoolers prefer the in-school setting. And that was something we wanted to definitely be proactive in getting student voice out there. It doesn't matter what they say. We wanted to let them know also we're seriously considering all the survey information, because lots of surveys have been sent out to parents, students, and staff. And it's important, I think, that we give them the feedback that we are listening and reading them and using that information to make decisions.
Right. And one of the things that was very similar between Dr. Grauer's survey and my survey was the students, their willingness to have a voice, right? They talked a lot about them wanting to have a voice in what happens in school, not necessarily with these decisions, but just overall in school, they want to make sure that they have a voice. So a couple of things that we had to consider for our tier 2. One is staying within teacher contract hours. So our teacher contract hours were actually 7:45 to 3:15 in order to accommodate safety for our bus routes and getting kids in and out of schools in the safest way possible. Dr. Grauer and I did go to our staff and say, hey, we need to move these hours from 8 to 3:30. I received a very positive response from our teachers because they know that, we're trying to do what we can to keep kids safe. Another big one is avoiding serving lunch, as it serves as a spreader opportunity. A lot of the research that we've been reading and things coming down is that, when there is spread, it's typically done around eating. So I think with this plan, it really mitigates that and provides us with an opportunity to still make sure, as Dr. Grauer said, kids are still getting their nutrients, but we're also adding an extra level of safety with that. And obviously maintaining strict social distancing each hour. Class size must fit room size limits. And that came from a really big help from Ittner Architects. Right. So this would be an example of what a tier 2 daily schedule looks like for Webster Groves High School. So you can see that, cohort A through L, so their last name starts with A through L, period 1, 2, 3, 4. In the middle there, so they would have 4 classes that are 40 minutes long. In the middle there, we would have building and sanitation and bus runs. And in that process, we would be switching. A through L would be going home, M through Z would be coming in, and then we would start back over with M through Z. So we would be dividing those classes in half. And Dr. Grauer, since I just stole your slide, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, that was yours.
Yeah, okay. But it does allow, students are in school 4 times a week, and students meet each class 2 times a week. It was very important for us to talk with other practitioners about the half-day cohorts and how that was working. And a lot of it what came out in our plan, but also in our conversation. So it allows us to teach all students in person in our current spaces by following CDC socially distanced safety protocols. We meet each class twice a week, and students come to school 4 days a week. We avoid lunch, which is the most opportune time for germ spreading. Students will get personalized learning service in smaller groups. Students and teachers will still have Wednesday office hours, asynchronous learning time each week with no formal classes. And then with four days of school week, we can better support students socially and emotionally and add needed supports quicker. The big thing.
Mike, can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and as Dr. Ziegler said, each school chooses its schedule based on sometimes some physical parameters that are in the building. We realized right away when we spaced out our classrooms based on the CDC social distancing recommendations that there was no way we could put 20 kids in our rooms and actually do this safely. So what we did was measure out each room, as Mike said, and realize we could do half-size cohorts. Now, the question is, do you bring the students in once or twice a week? Well, we want to get them as much as we can, of course. And so that's why we chose this one to maximize our time with them, because we felt that, personalized touch is something you cannot replace. Most of the time when I pop in Zoom classes, as you can see, our faces are all there. Many times you will see the student's name and a blank. And that is something where we've been working with kids, but also want them to feel comfortable with that. And imagine doing that day after day as a teacher and you're not having that interaction. So we definitely look forward to it, the point where we can work together with them, and we think we'll make a pretty strong impact. Oh, this is mine, Mike. Yes, this one is kind of a summary. I'll go over some of it, but the optimizing instruction piece is we will continue to use It's Learning as a curriculum platform. Our teachers will still meet in their formal meetings, whether it's grade level teams, curriculum action teams, morning professional learning committees, and our blended teams. Student attendance, again, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesday will be an office hour day or an advisory day. And teachers will keep an hourly class attendance via our Power School system. I mentioned earlier, lunch and breakfast are grab and go on the way out. And we're looking at how to revisit our sports planning. If and when we're back in school, how will that affect our competitions? And we're definitely planning to work with, Roxana and I and Amber, our athletic director, to see where we can go from there to get our kids some competition.
So Webster Groves High School and also Clayton have been using this schedule, but Webster Groves High School is able to share their statistics with us. And for 6 weeks, they've been using the schedule. So 0 students have contacted COVID and contact traced back to school. 0 staff members have contacted COVID in school and contact traced back to school. And 60 students have quarantined or isolated due to contact with people who have exhibited symptoms or caught COVID outside of school. And I know, talking with others, that 60, that number initially looks pretty alarming, but we look at quarantine and isolating as an intervention, right? And that's actually a good thing, that we're quarantining, we're isolating, we're identifying risk and making sure that we're taking levels of precaution to keep everyone safe. So here's what Webster Grove teachers said to us. I accomplished more in one 40-minute class session with students in person than I did all week on Zoom. The day is calm, it flows well, and I still have time to plan and work with colleagues. I love getting real-time feedback from students and being able to make real-time adjustments based on student response, right? I think it's obvious, when we're, right now, if we were all sitting in the boardroom, we'd all be able to read each other's body languages a lot more, right? It's great to see the kids. They value this time so much more and appreciate being here, even for half the day, 4 times a week. Each student is now getting more personalized attention than ever. It's hard not to eat lunch with colleagues. That was the big thing with the teachers over there. They just said, we know it's the safe thing to do, not to eat with our colleagues, but it's really hard and it's something we miss. I have to adjust my scope and sequence, but I have time to actually work with kids in person. And I offer Wednesday office hours for those struggling. And it's obvious that remote learning is not as effective in person, even with shorter days. One of the big things that we also talked to them about was they talked about kind of the rat race of, oh my gosh, we only have these kids for 40 minutes. What can I do in 40 minutes? But the idea that you have 40 minutes, but you have half the amount of students, right? And they said that that really kind of levels out, and there's this nice balance of 40 minutes and only having 8 to 12 kids in a class instead of 65 minutes, 70 minutes with 22 to 25.
So what do we do when students have to be quarantined or isolated and they are not physically with us? Well, you know, we already have Zoom links and we're pretty proficient at using them. And that's an option too. Kids can Zoom into the class as the teachers and students interact in person. The person at home can also be part of that. We always have the It's Learning option of kids following our class plans and progressions. And of course, teacher-student contact via email, quick Zooms, and peer-to-peer contact is also something that they can do, contact each other. They can call each other, but there are opportunities that we think we can keep learning going even when students may have to be isolated. We chose these three words on the secondary campus way back in the summer, and I credit Dr. Payton and Dr. Smith for this. And we've tried to stick to them. We put them in everything we do. And the reason being is that we knew going into this year, our mindset was going to be very important. And so we started with the word growth because we want to have a growth mindset and realize that we're kind of all first year teachers again, you know, doing this for 25 years, but I feel like some of this stuff is so brand new. And because of that, you know, I need to have a growth mindset and be open to learning, listening, finding new ways to be effective. And I think our staff has embraced that. Secondly, grace. We're going to mess up. And when we mess up, number one, we got to forgive ourselves. And number two, when other people mess up, we forgive them, but we get back to the drawing board and we don't stop and stay. We don't dwell in it. We move on from that. And we're flexible with the changes that come. And finally, gratitude. You know, this is a pandemic and we've had a great loss of life in our country and around the world. We are blessed to be able to continue to have our jobs and work in education. We constantly remind ourselves of that. And we count ourselves among the lucky ones. As those of us that are able to listen to this meeting, have our health, we feel blessed, and we want to carry that in how we interact with each other. And when the time comes to have students and staff back in the building, you know, we definitely want to continue this mindset of growth, grace, and gratitude.
So, you know, Dr. Grauer and I have really talked about, regardless whether it's January or when we do return to the classroom, we are going to be ready. You know, whether it's the tier 2 or, you know, some other version, we are going to be ready with whatever whatever we need to do. And we're excited about that. And we feel confident that we can deliver for teachers, we can deliver for students. And a big reason for that is, you know, we want to say thank you to the community members who continue to reach out to us and let us hear their voice. We appreciate the support from the board and the leadership from Roxanne and the central office team. So we just want to say thank you to everybody for continuing to assist us, and our teachers for being here every day and grinding with students, and our students who have just adapted the best they can with the situation they're dealing with. So thank you to everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would just like to point out to Mrs. Napper that these are pictures of things we cannot do when we're in the red. Like, you will not be seeing any of these scenarios in our schools for a very long time, because we cannot have group gatherings in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's last year.
If you walked into our cafeteria right now, there's actually plexiglass that are up at every single table and dividing out where kids can sit.
Roxana, I'm sorry, did you say my name?
I did. I was just I was just having a light moment in that you asked about what we couldn't do in the red. These would be two good examples of what can't happen when community spread is in the red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Dietrich and Dr. Grauer, I appreciate this, and I appreciate the vigilance with which you all are approaching the classroom experience for students. You know, I do acknowledge that there is the possibility of, you know, students to feel like the floodgates have been opened. You know, we're going back into classrooms and now we can do whatever we want outside of school too. You know, just wondering if there are plans or if there's been any conversation around how do we message, I think, to families, to students, that this is actually cause for getting more restrictive potentially in your day-to-day life if you want to be able to stay in a in-class experience.
Well, Katie, you're kind of letting one of the secrets out of the bag here, but I'll go ahead and let you know. Dr. Grauer and I have been working with our assistant principals and we're kind of assigning each other videos that we can make as more of an educational tool. So we can be, you know, modeling what does it look like in school, but also modeling what does it look like outside of school, right? So, you know, those will be an educational. Some of them may be more fun than others, you know, because obviously we need to make them attractive to students. But you can expect those as an educational tool as we're pulling students back into school.
And then to piggyback on that, I've actually been meeting separately with a lot of our teacher teams. I met today with the fine arts, the theater department, because those teachers have a lot of influence with students. And so we actually talked at length today about how we do things safely, but more importantly, how do we message for kids when they're not in our site, right? A lot of the extracurricular activities form groups of students that like to socialize. So how do we message what has to happen at home? And how do we message that for these things to continue, certain things that would have happened in prior years can't happen, like social gatherings at Quick Trip or, you know, whatever happens. And so we are having those conversations, and I believe that teachers have the relationships with kids that they'll be the primary drivers of influence.
Thanks. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. And I think we'll move forward to the buildings and grounds update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, and hopefully this won't be good morning in a little bit. There's two sections to my update, and the first one is I'm going to talk about a small renovation that is needed for the high school. They need to recapture a classroom, room 101. Hasn't been used for a while because of sound issues. And the sound's coming from a internal unit that's inside the confines of the space, plus a very noisy canvas ductwork. Add to that, the elevator mechanical space is also in that room. And so you just cannot concentrate to conduct a good learning experience for both our students and staff. The adjacent room, 102, also needs some work with the HVAC ductwork. Put together a small bid package, and in classroom 101, we're going to remove the soft ductwork and replace with a metal ductwork. We're going to remove the existing elevator equipment door. When investigating it, it's a hollow metal door that was put on this, and it's above the ground. It's not sealed all around. It's up about a ½ an inch. And so anytime the pumps or somebody's on the elevator, it makes a loud noise with the hydraulics. The HVAC unit that's in that space. Also, we're going to enclose that. It's hanging from the ceiling, but we're going to put sound baffles around it to limit it. And just a minor part of this is by doing that enclosure, we've got to relocate one of the existing light fixtures. And in room 102, next door to it, we're going to replace that canvas ductwork that needs to be worked. We received 3 responses to the RFP, and the low bid was from CKL Construction for $22,400. The next lowest was from IFS, Integrated Facility Services, for $23,500. And Beck's Construction, they came in at $29,300. CKL has performed numerous renovation projects with excellent results, and that I recommend that CKL Construction be awarded that work. One note, if this work is approved and later in this meeting, we're going to ask you to consider this proposal. I just right now just want to give you some basic information on it. It's about a 6 to 8 week lead time for the insulated door. It's a sealed door that will be on all 4 sides. So when it's closed, it'll really reduce the decibels that will be coming into the space. And then funds for this project will come from the Buildings and Grounds operating accounts. The second part of my presentation this evening is the monthly Buildings and Grounds update. I'm going to talk a little bit about maintenance and custodial, the transportation department, COVID-19 preparations, and then a brief construction update. One of the things, before I get started, our primary focus is to get the buildings ready for student return. And if you talk to any of our staff, they'll roll their eyes when you ask them, okay, what are you guys doing differently? Are you, they're saying, no, we are focusing on what we've always done on keeping the buildings clean. All we've done is really add new protocols for sanitation. The other thing that we keep sharing with everybody, they can't afford to make a mistake. They have to do excellent work every day, because mistakes just are not going to be tolerated. But our custodial crew continue to practice each day their protocols, and they are going to be prepared. And we're ready for that. Maintenance, in conjunction with that, continue to do their normal work on a daily basis, but they've been continue to work as we need to be flexible to make some minor adjustments in classrooms throughout the district. For transportation, the drivers are conducting weekly drives through the district each week in order to continue to refresh their driving skills, review their routes and stop locations, and for them to also become proficient in sanitation protocols. And we have begun conducting runs for picking up intervention students needing transportation to the respective schools. The plexiglass screens, I'd say, are about 98% finished throughout the district. Elementary and ECC buildings are completed. They will be completed, though, by the end of winter break. We received an order of tables that were needed in the middle school. They came yesterday and they were brought up into the hallway. And so over winter break, we will be putting those plexiglass screens in place. I want to give an update on the automatic bottle fillers. We have 4 that have been completed at both the Early Childhood Center and the elementary school. And this, or next week, we hoped that it would have been tomorrow, but on Monday, they'll start putting in the bottle fillers for the high school. So those also will be completed by the time everybody comes back after the holiday session. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the construction update. The HVAC rooftop replacement started yesterday. The original plans were to have this huge crane for 2 days. Even though, and we figured it was going to be longer because the day started off with snow, if you recall, yesterday, but everything was planned very well by the contractor. It went smoothly, and half of the units now have been replaced up on the roof of this building, the high school that is. That's where I'm sitting right now. And as of this afternoon, all of those are fully operational. There'll be some minor tweaking tomorrow, but this first group will be finished before the end of the day tomorrow. Monday, excuse me for a second. Monday morning, the crane will return, but this time it's not going to impact Lohmeyer. It's not going to impact any other operation of the building. It's going to be on the southwest drive. It's where the buses park. It'll be at the very far end, and it will be replacing the huge unit for the gymnasium and the south part of the building. And we expect that work to be completed by the end of the day, Wednesday, on the 23rd. Unfortunately, I've had to request that the gym and part of the cafeteria be off limits, especially while this very large unit is moved, and they've had to cancel some practices but my apologies for that. But the benefit hopefully will far outweigh the inconvenience. Let's see, last month I shared about a grant from Ameren that IFS, our contractor, has helped us with. I'm pleased to report that with the work that is being done this week and will be completed, we will pick up a 15% increase, bonus, if you will, because it's done before the end of December. And that instead of 29,000, will get just shy of 34,000 in a grant from Ameren. And then under the Idner project, work is progressing with the ECC cottage. The 2 sections are joined. Plumbing has been connected. The electricity is on in it. The exterior decks and ramps, they're just starting that work now. Last Friday, I did a walkthrough inspection with the Pac Van representative. That's the manufacturer of the 2 units. Some minor interior details were noted. The majority of all of that was from traveling from Atlanta area all the way up here and over all the roads, just the jostling of the trailer. But nothing major was found. And at next month's B&G update, I hope to have a definitive date as to when that will be turned over for our use. And I'll answer any questions anyone might have. Thank you.
Thanks for the very thorough report, as usual. We'll move on to the Return to Learning Family Handbook.
So draft handbook is attached. One of the commitments we made in October was to try to take these fairly complex plans that we had at each building and try to help families understand more how that works operationally. And so the administrative team has worked collaboratively to condense and edit a handbook for families that explain reentry processes and lots of information about COVID mitigation strategies and how they work in schools. We are a little delayed getting it to you because the health department issued some really nuanced guidance to us. What was that? They signaled it was coming last month. We got it probably about 2 weeks ago, and we're still working through that. It says draft because I think we have a couple additional things we want to finalize with the nurses just to make sure that our protocols are consistent and that anything that we are saying we're going to do, that we have all the procedures in place to do. I think we're probably 98 or 99% there. So I would anticipate we'd be able to release this to the community. If not tomorrow, then certainly early next week. Ed, I know your team's done a lot of work on the graphics. Do you have anything you would like to add?
No, just what you said. We have a couple of things in here, like, there's one piece of it that we're probably going to change involving classroom level contact for cases. Also, when it is time to disseminate this, I'm going to make it clear to the families that we will be able to deliver a hard copy to those who need it. And we structured this handbook such that, yeah, there are hyperlinks in it and there are links to forms and things like that. But those are, you could read a hard copy version of this and not miss a lot by not being able to click on the links. However, like I said, I'll make it clear that we will provide a hard copy version, and no one will go without if they're, if they're not connected well.
We also,
yeah,
sorry, Ed, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but we also do have to make it very clear based on one thing we know about COVID, the only constant is change, right? So we have to make it very clear that that handbook is likely to be updated frequently as we get different guidance or changes in terms of, what our local health departments are saying are best practices at that moment in time. So we want everybody to have it so we can be completely transparent about how we operationalize. But I say that with the caveat that I do anticipate changes as we go.
And that's why having it linked to the website or allows us to change it so people, when they access it, will always have the most recent copy, although we will provide hard copies. That is the big advantage of having it linked and be able to edit it as we go.
Our nurses went through this with a fine-tooth comb. I can't thank them enough.
They're unbelievable.
Yeah, they were instrumental in this.
Yeah.
Great. Any immediate questions here?
I guess I appreciate the guide. It's really nice, very well done. I think my question is not really specifically to the guide, but maybe tangentially related. I'm saying, did you hear how my pitch went up with that, Roxana? Like, oh. So the parents that have mentioned the difficulty with the half days, or like maybe going in the afternoon when it would be better for their work schedule to go in the morning. I know that you all have, I'm sure, thought about that. Can you kind of tell us what you all have been brainstorming regarding those issues? Sure. Can those families contact you all to work something out?
Absolutely. We are two things. So one, in terms of the morning versus the afternoon, or if we need to keep family groups together across buildings. I know that principals are working individually with families because we know every family has different circumstances, and that, you're not locked into an alphabet group if that's not working for your family. So absolutely. I have been brainstorming with Angela Thompson and Cindy Heavenstreit about what happens if we do have some folks who want to be part of the tiers plan and absolutely do not have additional childcare options. We are doing our due diligence. I have contacted the Heights, so they're going to remain open. We're talking with the Salvation Army spaces. We're looking at different places. We're even looking to see if we might be able to use some space to get the social distancing and then perhaps staff it for some kind of aftercare. Nothing's definitive with that. There's a lot of issues that have to be worked out, but we are looking at it and we are having active conversations. And if we can find a solution, we want to do that.
Okay. And then I have a second question, Roxana, if you would please. The families that are in the tiered right now, if they decide to go to the online option for the rest of the semester, can you kind of just give us a brief overview of what that looks like for them as far as like the curriculum that they've been working on when they were in the tiered system and how that's going to transfer over to online? Like, is it going to be a seamless transition, or really just what does that look like?
Well, they're as with everything in COVID, there are challenges every direction that we go. So if you are in grades 7 through 12 right now, because of staffing and because of some things that we learned in first semester, those students will be enrolled in Launch. And so they will have courses that are aligned to Missouri standards with Missouri certified teachers that are not necessarily, well, they won't be MRH teachers, but we can include them in our tutoring groups. We can include them, in our counseling groups, all of those kinds of things. So it will be like taking courses that you would have signed up for. You're just taking them with different teachers, right? In grades K through 6, we've been working really closely with our principals and the virtual teachers to try to address some of the concerns that families have had. And this has been tricky too. I just actually met with one of the teachers yesterday in a separate meeting, and she was expressing that some parents want more synchronous time for the all virtual students. And we've been trying to build in more MRH curricular experiences to make sure that, that's working. But one of the things they found was some of the parents need less synchronous time because they need that to work around their work schedules. So I know that there will be variance. I know that early on, we had a lot of people with concerns about the all virtual curriculum and how different it was. We're doing our best to try to reconcile those needs. There will be some variance, but there is variance. We're going to work really hard to try to find the right balance for the folks who sign up for those courses. And I want to continue the dialogue. I want to continue the dialogue with families. You all have heard me say before, because of our size, staffing is a problem. And so we can't guarantee that folks necessarily even can stay with the same group of kids if you're switching out of one or the other. If you've been in all virtual, you'll stay with your same all virtual teacher, but a lot of this depends on the numbers that we have. Something else that we learned that we had to address in the, early on last year was we needed to add some staff. And we needed to repurpose some staff to make sure that we've got, particularly the early grades, the small reading groups and those kinds of things. So we're committed to doing that. I think you could see some variance. And part of that's the nature of what we know is good for kids that are in all virtual environment for the entire year and what they need in terms of repetition and continuity. But we're going to try to minimize that as best we can. It will be different, and I need to be transparent about that. It will be different in terms of the tools that are used. We're going to try to make it more normal in terms of providing the right balance of synchronous time based on the needs of the families that are there. And I think teachers have learned that they have quite a bit of discernment in terms of how much MRH curriculum to add in and how much they need to stick with the program. And again, it's a balancing act between competing needs that we're seeing. And I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer, Nikki, but that's an honest one.
I think that's fair. I mean, I kind of just, asked you that. So I'm not trying to play gotcha.
No, I know. But I'm saying this in all honesty, because we did get a lot of feedback. We got a lot of feedback in the parent survey, and we got some in the student survey about what was working for them and what was not working for them, and what they were happy about, and what they had concerns about. And so every building is in possession of all of that. We're looking at it very carefully. I know the principals have already been working very closely with the all virtual teachers. I've already been invited to another round of them between now and early January, so that we can, as we begin to get the staffing right and start to look at resetting second semester, that we can address some of those concerns.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, then let's move forward to the alternative methods of instruction.
I won't belabor this. In order to operate all virtually as we have done, and even to operate in a hybrid model, we had to write a alternative methods of instruction plan and have that plan approved and get a waiver from the state. And so as part of that waiver request, we have to do some reporting about how things are going. I'm not going to read all of this to you. This meeting is going really long, but I did want to remind you that everything that we're able to do is because we've asked for a waiver from state statute. And in order to do that, we had to consider very carefully the learning environments, everything from how families were going to get materials to having a consistent platform to put out assignments, our assessment protocols, what we have in place for intervention and student supports, how we're going to communicate with families. So all of that had to have been carefully planned and meet specifications. I will say DESE has allowed us a lot of freedom and creativity in terms of what best meets our local community conditions, which has been very helpful as we've been negotiating these plans. I mentioned this earlier, the building administrators meet with me every Monday, and we go over the plans, we go over the data that we're collecting, we look at feedback that they have received and I have received in terms of trying to make adjustments to operational conditions to best make sure that our students are well educated in whichever of the tiers or options that students find themselves in. In addition to that, we have targeted work groups that are meeting on a weekly basis. Technology meets multiple times a week with Chris to address any technology concerns. I have curriculum teams that are meeting with me, and we've contracted with Tammy Romberg to run meetings in my absence if I'm pulled in other directions currently. Rachel Ward is doing a phenomenal job keeping up with assessment and minimizing the amount of assessment that we're doing to maximize learning time, but at the same time making sure that the right assessments are given so that we have good data to run our RTI and our intervention programs. And the list goes on. I mean, we just have lots of work groups that are meeting regularly to make this happen. We have surveyed parents, teachers, and students. We plan to do that at the end of each quarter. We're taking that feedback very seriously. As I've mentioned, principals and myself are also receiving lots of information on a daily basis from students and teachers and parents, and bringing that back to the table as we look at and amend our plans. Another piece of that we are guaranteeing and have to guarantee is our teacher observation and evaluation process continues, as well as review of lessons. Our teachers are amazing. I cannot thank them enough for the hard work that they're doing. And so our process, when I say teacher evaluation, is really about growth. It really is about what they need and how we can best support them in that endeavor. And so that all is going on. And as part of that process, we're trying to understand their needs better so that as we adjust our plans, those things are taken into consideration. One of the things we had to talk about was what we're finding are the best, most effective methods for interacting with students. What we're finding for us is it is truly a combination of large group, small group, and individual synchronous lessons via Zoom, as well as bringing kids on campus for some direct face-to-face intervention. That that flexibility to do that has been really critical for us to keep kids moving forward. We are finding that there are some families who have expressed very strongly that they need to work in an asynchronous environment, and that they are appreciative of the It's learning progressions, because while that system is also imperfect, it has allowed them to have some flexibility based on their family's needs. So when we talk about engagement, that's something that's super important. You heard Dr. Grauer touch on that in terms of kids who might log on, but teachers are not sometimes certain if they're keeping up. So we actually are measuring engagement in multiple ways. One way is, are they showing up for the synchronous class time, right? And we do take daily attendance, so we kind of know who's here and who we haven't seen and who we need to follow up with. But that isn't the whole story. We have a number of students who are participating asynchronously, who are watching the recorded sessions, they're doing the work, they're keeping up based on what their family needs in terms of their ability to move forward. And so both of those things are tracked. Teachers are asked to submit weekly issues. They turn those into the principals and Vince's student services team. And there is a diligent follow-up that is happening that I can't really speak to because I'm not the one doing that work. I hear the reports. Vince would be much better placed to talk about what that looks like. Vince, would you like to add any comments about engagement and follow-up for kids that might be dropping off the radar?
Sure, briefly, of course, because I recognize the time, but just even today. So one of the things that we are having our toolbox that we didn't have with the spring is ability to do outreach. So we've really ramped up. We do more home visits now than we've ever done, and we do them spontaneously. I was over working with Joe's place today, and I got a call from the middle school counselor who did 5 home visits yesterday. It was giving me a report, and they were all students that they had concerns about with regards to engagement. And so she learned a lot of different things happening in all the homes, but it's powerful. And so this is one of the things that we're using to really kind of drill down on engagement. The concern we have is the students that aren't engaging. It's a small percentage, but their lack of engagement is troubling. And so we're trying to really be creative about how to get them back started again. And it's a wide variety of folks. But so those are one of the things that we had in our toolbox this year that we did not have in the spring. And it's proven to be effective.
One of the things we have to report on is whether or not kids are still receiving elective courses. Obviously, in our district, those opportunities for creativity, for the arts, for the additional outlets for kids is very important to us. And so we are making sure that is continuing. We are trying to provide supplies for students in order to engage in those things at home. And we're doing that through porch pickup or drop off. We've gotten a variety of feedback from families around this aspect as well. For some families, they're reporting it seems overwhelming. Other families are saying, and students are saying this is a lifeline. It's a really important part of their day. And so we're, again, trying to monitor that based on what students need, make sure that it's available, make sure that kids have opportunities, as well as, even library and guidance and the ability to have high quality books and all the things. There are efforts being made to continue to provide a well-rounded education regardless of what tier we're in. And we realize the challenges of all of the things I just said in order to operationalize that. And all about on-campus interventions. I think we've reported on this particular set of data a number of times, so I won't belabor it, but I did want you to see what's going on with the AMIX plan and the level of accountability that we have to make sure that those things happen, and kind of the highlights of what our report was.
You want to keep moving into the survey data?
Sure. I am not intending on walking you through all of that blow by blow. It is printed there for you as a summary. All of that data is housed in our Panorama system, and we deliberately put it in Panorama because that's where we have our prior social emotional data, and it allows us to do some correlations and some tracking. We actually have people from Panorama that are meeting with us on Monday to help us with some of that work. The data that I've compiled here is just a high-level overview. It is It attempts to be, I think, neutral in tone, in that what I really want you to see is we ask questions about a wide range of areas, and we got a wide range of opinions. What I can tell you that you won't see in this data is that whether it's teacher survey or whether it's parent survey or whether it's student survey, people have a wide variety of opinions about what is best, and they're very passionate about those opinions, and they are, all of them have really good solid reasoning for why they need what they need or how they feel what they feel. So it is, there was a lot to look at, and it's challenging to look at because the variety of needs is so great. And every decision that is made has trade-offs in terms of what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. And I think we're taking that very, very seriously, knowing full well that no matter what recommendation we make in any of the areas we've talked about tonight, that some of those things are going to work better for some families and less well for some families. They're going to be supportive of some of the things teachers want, and they're going to feel less supportive for other groups who have different needs. We'll continue to work through that data. The principals also have it by building, and so they have teacher groups that they are working with to work through that specific to their age group and building needs. There was some really valuable things that we heard from, again, teachers, parents, and students about what's working, what's not working, the fears that they had about a potential return, the fears that they had about staying in all virtual. It runs the gamut, I think, of all of the emotions and all of the reasons and all of the rationale that you've heard in letters and that we continue to hear. So it's a really rich data set. We'll do a similar survey at the end of second quarter, because I think it's super important that we keep hearing from folks so that we can try to improve our practice to the best we can in the environment that we're living in. If you have any specific questions about any of those data sets, I'm happy to talk about them, but I did want to make sure that you at least had the high level data and had an overview of what we're doing with it.
Hopefully this doesn't cause a long answer, but when you say it's going into Panorama, then so like an individual kid's answer, if it relates to sort of like intervention or some sort of additional supports that we can potentially provide, will it be matched in some cases to that individual, or is it TBD? Or I know Panorama has a lot of data that gets attached so that multiple people can get in there and like give the right supports when needed in certain
Right now we have that data de-identified.
Sure, I can understand why that would. Yeah. I totally understand that.
But we can aggregate it at the building level and by grade level to help us understand the volume of concerns or supports or what worked for a specific group of students, not individual students per se.
Okay.
But at a level that we could make, the whole purpose of this was to get a sense of trends so that we can respond to those trends.
And then hopefully putting in the right resources at the building level allows you to then get to the individual student. Is that accurate?
That's the idea, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Thanks. That data is hopefully very useful to our teachers and building leaders. We'll move on then. Thanks for joining us, Rachel.
Thank you for having me. Good evening. My name is Rachel Ward. I'm the coordinator of assessment, data, and accountability for the evening, for the district. I'm sorry. This evening, it's only the evening. I'm going to show you guys a quick assessment update. Can you see that or not? You cannot. Hold on. I tried to be fancy and put it into full mode before it didn't work. Okay. Quickly, the DESE update regarding maps and EOCs. They are still required this year for our students to take. Currently, only on campus is an option. We've been told they're working on that and that could change, but at this moment, the students must come to campus. The state board did vote to not use the the results for accountability purposes. So that means that none of the accreditation factors will be changed based on these results, but they are still required. But we don't quite know, or we're unsure of some of the impact and use of the data from these results at this point. We are currently in the midst of our fall EOC administration. We have any student that is an early graduate or is finishing a semester-long course is coming to campus for this administration. It's mostly government with a few other courses and students there. We are following all COVID safety protocols on campus. We also are administering a little bit of that MOLEAP assessment. So the DESE created an assessment to help us, some practice MAP and EOC assessments to help us gauge the instructional impact of some of our decisions, instructional decisions during this time. So we are implementing the science MOLEAP assessment in grades 5 and 8 because we have limited information for science. We're also going to administer our STAR. Oh, I'll get there. But that's what we're using for grade level. For EOCs, we are going to administer our own, we're going to administer those internally and gather some standard level data. STAR assessments, so that is our internal benchmark assessment. We are going to administer that in grades K through 6 in reading and math. It's going to be towards the end of first semester, may even bleed into February a little bit. And we will use those results also to guide our interventions. A little bit of what we're just talking about with the panorama results. We're looking at kind of that bigger level, and then also going to look at those individual students, obviously, and continue our RTI processes. Gifted screening. So this is actually, I believe, something will be, is it a motion? It's something to be voted on, I think, the assessment plan. So we adapted our assessment plan slightly because we picked up where we left off in the spring and the summer with our screening of our then first graders, now current second graders for gifted. We've actually this past week have been doing some creativity assessments on campus. And so the proposed change in the assessment plan is that we are using the creativity assessment packet, the CAP, instead of the torrents for creativity assessment. They are still on the DESE approved list of assessments to use. We just didn't have it in our own assessment plan because we usually use the torrents, but the CAP can be used in groups rather than individual. And so since we were bringing students on campus, we tried to capitalize on that group. It also is more of a nonverbal assessment and thought that might be good given the times and the age group of the students. And then WIDA and Access will be picking up the window is from January to March. When I met with our ESOL teachers, we're probably going to be looking in that kind of February to March range, just given where our semester falls. But this is the required state assessment for all students who qualify for ESL services. Again, this also must be administered on campus. And this assessment is pretty critical to their services. It really helps guide where those students' needs are, where their growth is, and guides that program. So we'll be administering those on campus. Any questions about that or about the adjustments to the assessment plan?
Thank you very much.
Thank
Making
you.
that clear and easy. Appreciate it. All right, moving into board communications. As far as calendar is concerned, obviously continue virtually. I just want to update the board. I have made contact with Cynthia Merchek from the MAP Center. She followed up with Roxana and me after the work session earlier this month and was indicating that the MAP Center would be available and ready to present our survey data around equity, the education equity conversation in late February. So I have sent her some thoughts on scheduling that, have not yet heard back from her on specifics. And so Kat Norton is now on the case to get Cynthia settled on a date to come back and visit with us on that information. Other than that, we'll obviously convene again at our January 7th work session to discuss a variety of topics.
Katie, can I piggyback just a minute?
Sure.
So one of the things I did not say earlier is the superintendent's work group, who has been meeting every Wednesday since March, thinking about how to do COVID reentry, is shifting topics after the first of the year, since most of the schools at least have their tiers plans in place. And we're thinking about equity and what it looks like as we transition post-COVID, and what do we do about all of the things that we've learned, and how do we handle any disparities that may have arisen as a result of this, COVID year. So we are doing a book study together with two experts, and I apologize that it's so late that I can't remember the name of the book, but after talking with Katie and telling her that we thought, reentry, we really need to be thinking about equity issues, and that's what the superintendents are going to do. I've had Kat go ahead and order all of you the same book, because I thought it might be a really nice idea as we continue our equity conversations. If you all can kind of take that journey with me, so that when I'm talking about things that I might be hearing from the work group, you will have at least the same resources that we're using as we have those conversations regionally.
Happy holidays. You get a book from Roxana.
Love books, Roxana. Thank you, girl.
You're welcome.
All right. That's it for the calendar. Acknowledging that I did not attend the SSD meeting this month because we had a conflict with our executive session meetings, but there is actually a link in that agenda item with the governing council meeting. It is the cycle where our district's SSD rep is actually up for election this cycle. So you may have community members who reach out to you. I know I have had some who have shown some interest in the possibility of running for the SSD position, which we know is extremely important. As far as Joe's Place, any update, Brandy or Ralph?
I don't have one. I didn't attend the last meeting. What about you, Ralph? Except for I did get a wonderful card. I wanted to say that the Joe's Place Christmas cards went out and they are awesome.
Ralph, you're muted.
Yes, Julia Schaefer did send out a email to all of Joe's Place board members. There was a conflict in a date that we were trying to schedule for our December meeting. So it really did not happen, and it's going to be rescheduled for next month. But we did have a Giving Tuesday, which is one of St. Louis area's way of showing their gratitude to different organizations and nonprofit. So there was some funds taken up for Giving Tuesday to Joe's Place. And still, if anyone wants to contribute to that, they still can. So that is about the only update I have. So there was some donations made toward Joe's Place on the Giving Tuesday, which I believe was the 2nd of December, which was a kind of a St. Louis area day to give to different organizations. So we're grateful for whatever donations we have received, and you're still able to give if you would like to. So that's about the only update I have on that. And hopefully we get rescheduled sometime in January for our meeting.
Great, thank you very much. And yeah, a good reminder that folks can do their end of the year charitable donations to Joe's Place. Great. And a CBTF report, I think, Wes, that may have been a remnant of previous meetings here.
That's right. There's nothing that I have new over what was reported last month.
Thank you.
I would like to just say to the board that, you know, part of our, we kind of have a three-pronged approach for having teacher forums. We've had the teacher association meetings, and the teachers meet with my team once a month, which has been going strong. CBTF, we meet monthly around compensation and benefits. There has been a third tier, the Com Forum, which is a place where you know, teachers and board members can just dialogue about issues. I would say 2 or 3 years ago, the groups mutually decided that there was not a need to continue that. I think this time has proven there is a need, that the more dialogue there is, the better. And so I have suggested to the Teachers Association that would be a good idea if we resurrected Com Forum. And so I don't know how the board feels about that, but I think it would be greatly appreciated if we could schedule monthly meetings where, you know, a few of you at least could come with whatever teacher representatives are determined, and just dialogue about whatever issues we're facing, because this is a complex problem, and I think we need to listen to each other.
We used to have not so much to talk about. I think we have more than enough to talk about. I think it's probably a really good idea at this point.
Yeah, the agenda used to dwindle towards the end there, which was just a sign of our accessibility. Yeah. But there's no question there seemed to be a need. Although the old communications forum structure was just twice a year, so I'm not sure if that would meet the current need, but that's how we used to do it.
Yeah, I was curious if we might offer one each quarter, or maybe, you know, on the earlier side of the, you know, the 2021 calendar, and then see how that goes, and if we need to schedule a second one, we could do that.
Yeah.
All right. I'll work with Kat to make that happen if you're all in agreement that that's a good thing.
Yes.
Yes.
That works. Great. Well, then we can move into the finance report.
Well, I couldn't help but notice that you saved the best to last. So I will not linger on these things. All in all, the district finances are in really great shape, especially considering the economy and what's going on in the world right now. We've done a really good job as a team, the adults that are responsible for spending this money, to do so responsibly and thoughtfully. So I'm very pleased, as one that's very process oriented, and really, really important to me that all of the people that spend this money understand how that comes to us, which is our local taxpayers in large part, and that we're very appreciative of their contribution, especially now when so many school districts are struggling and ours is on solid financial foundation. So in November, you won't see a whole lot of revenue just because the tax receipts start rolling in December. Just as an aside, anecdotally, I will tell you that a couple of weeks ago, I got a wake up text message from our accounting manager who monitors the bank accounts every day. And we got a $4.9 million deposit from our local tax receipts. So that money has started coming in right on time. We were wondering if it was going to come in on time or not, and it absolutely did. So that's always a good day when you see almost $5 million hit your bank accounts. So again, that was nice to see that the county is on track with all of those collections. So moving on through, we are just slightly under collected on revenue at this time, which I'm not concerned about. Most of that's timing on some of our federal revenue that we received out of sync last year. You will notice, referencing food service, this is a pretty big change. We have written off all of the collection food sales to students and food sales to adults, because we're not doing that this year. We are currently, because of the federal waivers, operating under the seamless summer option. So in effect, the National School Lunch Program, NSLP, is suspended. So all of our students will receive these meals and will be reimbursed for all of them. So that will, however, reduce the amount of revenue that we receive on the food service program. So it's rare that you'll see blanks in in the revenue budget. So that's what that means. And also on the preschool revenues, those have been adjusted down to accommodate the program not being in session. So all in all, revenues are in great shape in November. You'll see a lot more activity on the December statements next month. 85% of our revenues are local, from our local taxpayers, so, and other local sources. I've alluded to that already. Expenses are right on track on the instructional side. I'm starting to see things ramp up as we're planning for students to return, hopefully in January. So our budget supervisors are definitely preparing for that. Salaries and benefits as a category are right where we had expected them to be. We did a budget adjustment last month, so the number is a little bit more true to where they ought to be. And you'll see that 32% compared to 34% on the salaries and 32% compared to 33% last year. So we are right on track. Those are two budgets that we watch extraordinarily closely to make sure that we're tracking appropriately. And our accounting system lets us do that fairly quickly. Purchase services, about half where we are, and we've already decided that COVID has changed the way we do our professional development. And since we're not flying around and learning all these wonderful things across the country, some of those trips are either stalled or canceled. Supplies is about where we would expect it to be this time of the year. Those things are ramping up, so I expect quite a bit more activity in December. Capital outlay, right about where you're at. You've heard most of these projects have been moved into the bonds. You heard Mr. Whelan talk about a few that are coming out of operating so that we can get these kids back in a safe environment. Debt service, right where we would expect it to be. We just made some payments just a couple of days ago, earlier in the week, using our new wire transfer function in our banking system. So that was exciting. Operating funds, categorically, salary and benefits make up 3/4 of our expenditures, and supplies 10%, purchase services at 12%. Everything else is negligible in the grand scheme of things. Coming down to the bottom line, our 2021 budget, as adjusted last month, looks like we will end the year, at least budgeted right now, at about 40% fund balance, which is an extremely strong number, especially given current conditions. Any questions?
Thank you.
Wonderful. With your permission, I'll move on.
Please.
All right, so I'm trying to find the tab that I put this on, but every year, one of my favorite times of year is budgeting. It's not really my favorite time of year this year because it's very much more difficult given the large amount of unknowns that the pandemic has caused in school finances. However, we're going to give it a go anyway, and we're going to make a good run at this budget. One of those things that guides us is the budget directive. So again, I'm still looking for my tab. Last year, the admin team and the board spent quite a lot of time thoughtfully reconstructing this budget directive to fit the districts and board's priorities and goals. I think the most notable changes is the laser-like focus on equity initiatives, and also which include college and career readiness, culturally relevant curricula, trauma-informed care, and response to intervention, or RTI. Of course, those things are still front and center, especially now. So I feel like the budget directive as it was put together last year is still very relevant and can stay unchanged. Joe's Place is always going to need repairs and maintenance. That's just how that rolls. One addition is that we do need to be aware that the pandemic does cause fluctuations and spikes, either plus or negative, on revenue and expenditures. So we just need to acknowledge that in our budget directive. So that gives us the flexibility to make changes quickly if we need to, both on the budgeting side and the expense side once you approve the budget for the next year. And I believe I'm asking you to vote on this evening so we can hit the budget season strong.
Great. Yeah, I thank you for reminding us that we did spend some intentional time last year reconstructing this and kind of updating the language. You know, Chris, I think every year we've gotten sharper in our ability to articulate the connection between our commitment to education equity and how it shows up in the budget. You know, I would challenge us, I know in a challenging year, to, you know, to get even more transparent about how we're connecting line items to these, you know, commitments to equity. And I don't know exactly what that looks like because, you know, I recognize the complications of school finance as it is, and, you know, all the bells and whistles of our accounting software. But, you know, I just want to voice that. And I think everything in the directive is spot on. And this isn't necessarily about you all. It's about, you know, how we as a board, you know, get even more intentional about connecting the dots of where we invest into our values.
And that really falls directly on us as an administrative team and central office to make sure that those things remain in place. I believe I sent you as a board the link to the budget prep document that I send to all the administrators to use as a guidance document to put their budgets together. While they don't necessarily care for that 76-page packet that I send them, the first 8 pages of that are extraordinarily important as it lays the groundwork, puts together the frame and the context for them to build their budget. So it puts right in front of them the district's mission, vision, the 4 cornerstones, our focus on equity, the PELP model, all of those things, and wraps it up in what I think is a fairly concise package that if they follow the steps that are outlined there, they really don't have much of a choice other than to build a budget that's based on those things. And then when we go through our budget review process, we question them thoroughly as to how what they're budgeting for connects directly to all of those things that I just mentioned.
I think that was what I was going to add. Is it's important to note that every single person that preps a budget meets with Chris and I, and we go through line by line what it is, and we ask a lot of questions about, you know, things that aren't included or that should be, or things that are included. So we use that budget document and those directives as part of our review process as well.
It truly is a defense of budgets.
I like the budget directive a lot. Chris, you said you needed it approved tonight, if possible. It's not in the action item, so
is it not on there?
We just need to amend the agenda. I mean, I have no problem other than unless other board members want to take some more time to read through it. But I feel like it's good as is. But just
I would appreciate it. Thinking of the timeline, we're about a month behind on getting. We're getting our administrators through February to get their budgets completed. Usually we're complete on the collection by that time, but given everything that they're dealing with right now, they need another minute. If you do feel like we need to spend more time on this, I don't have a problem waiting to January. Otherwise, I would appreciate you taking care of it tonight. And I do apologize for that oversight.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we were working with your timeline as well.
I appreciate it.
I'm fine with amending it and voting on it tonight.
Oh, I have no issues with voting for it tonight.
Yeah, I don't think this is terribly controversial.
I agree.
Okay, moving on to the agenda, if that's all right. We'll just take a quick glance at the COVID expenditures. The board did ask that I track these separately so that we can pull them out so we understand the direct financial impact, at least on the expense side. So just going across the bottom line categorically here, our total expenses through December 8th, which is when these numbers were collected, $470,708. Of that, $264,863 have been reimbursable through various grants and funding mechanisms as a result of the CARES Act, both state, federal, and county. So extraordinarily thankful for that. So a net cost to the district on COVID and all of the 5 categories here: instructional, professional development, technology, food service, PPE, and cleaning supplies. We are at a net cost to the district of $205,845 through December the 8th.
Chris, do you know what the availability of future CARES Act money looks like?
You know, I really don't. We didn't qualify for as much of that as I wished we would have. However, I will say this. I firmly believe, with equity in mind, that a lot of school districts that weren't as well positioned as we were on the technology side were able to access those funds. MRH, we've been one-to-one in our upper grade levels since 2006. So that's 14 years. This is not our first rodeo when it comes to making sure that kids have computers and that we know how to use them both on the staff side and on the student side. So we were pretty much one-to-one inside the school buildings at the lower grade levels anyway. They were just in carts. So I feel grateful, blessed, whatever adjective you want to use there, that we were well positioned. When the county came out with some of their offers and grants, I even had a conversation with Roxanne. I said, Roxanne, I'm having a little bit of a integrity moment here, because I feel almost guilty for asking for some of these things, because we were in such a strong position. So we did ask for things, of course, but those things were given to us without question from the county and state. But I do feel like those funds were directed to the schools that absolutely needed them.
And that's great. I mean, and certain things like technology, I definitely see that. For PPE and things like that, I feel like, we're just as deserving in a lot of respects, and our people need to be protected as well. So
we did get all those grants. We did not get the I don't know. Did we get the connectivity or access? One of the tech grants we did not get because we already had everything, but we did get the county match. I am starting to see some things filter to me about future funding and future plans for funding. I saw the proposal the federal proposal that's currently out. It is not as much money as was in earlier proposals, but it does look like some money will be coming our way after it filters through the state. So we're just kind of in a holding pattern to wait to see what that actually looks like.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we definitely took advantage of the PPE and cleaning supplies.
Yeah,
clearly all over the place.
That's great though.
Ed just picked up this week. We continue to get PPE. I know we just got another shipment of masks in that you just went and picked up from the central distribution for us this week. So we're really well set in terms of masks and other PPE for both students and staff.
No more masks. No more gloves. We are ready for something. I'm not sure what. We're going to gloves. Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, hopefully some resolution at the state or federal level can happen here before the end of the year. All right. Any other questions on finances before we move to action items? All right. Can I have a motion on the policy batch?
I move to approve policies BBFA, DFI, GBCA, and JECA as modified.
Second.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Wes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
A motion on the financial statements.
Move to approve the fiscal year 20 audited financial statements as presented by KEB.
Second.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Nikki. All those in favor say aye.
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 Do we want to add the other item now or wait?
Oh, the budget. Yes, the budget directive. Thank you for that.
Why don't you wait and do it at 7.06A?
Okay.
Fine. Yeah.
We'll keep going then. The revised assessment plan.
Move to approve the revised 2020-2021 assessment plan as presented.
Thank you, Brandy.
Second.
Thank you, Nikki. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Traffic study proposal.
Move to approve the traffic study proposal from CBB not to exceed $13,300 as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Wes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Renovation work motion.
Move to approve the renovation work for rooms 101 and 102 as submitted.
Second.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Nikki. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
MRH Building Corporation motion.
Move to dissolve the MRH Building Corporation as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Wes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Motion to amend the action item agenda.
Second.
Thank
So
you.
moved.
So moved.
Thank you. We'll add the budget directive then. So
Motion
have
to
to vote.
approve the budget directive as submitted.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Vote to, yeah. All right. Executive session motion.
All right. I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on December 17, 2020 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters, identifiable student matters.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Brandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thanks for sticking through this open session, and we'll reconvene in a closed executive session.
Thank you.
Thank you.